The summer sun glints faintly across the endless Russian plains, where dust and smoke mingle in a haze that hides the horizon. Tanks crawl forward like iron beasts, their treads grinding through soil that has swallowed countless armies in centuries past. Columns of soldiers march beneath banners fluttering in the wind, while the distant thunder of artillery echoes like a storm breaking across an ancient steppe. Imagine now that this moment, this titanic struggle of 1941 unfolds not as it did in our history, but in another path, a shadowed possibility. Imagine the German invasion, Operation Barbarossa, not faltering in the snow, not halted before Moscow, not shattered at Stalingrad, but instead breaking through, overwhelming, unstoppable. The Soviet Union crumbles, its defenses shattered, its leader vanished into silence, its vast expanse laid bare. What then, we must ask, would the world have become if Hitler had triumphed in the East? Before we begin this long journey into speculation and memory, let me pause with you. Perhaps you are listening in the quiet of night, in the stillness of your home, or during a long journey where time feels suspended. In this moment, you and I are linked, part of a vast web of memory and imagination that spans continents and generations. If this world of alternate history stirs your curiosity, I invite you to subscribe, to walk with me further into these shadowed paths of what if. Ist. Picture the year 1942, but not the one written in the history books. In this other world, Moscow has fallen. The city of red walls and golden domes, once alive with the speeches of Stalin and the songs of defiance, lies silent beneath the swastika. Stalin himself has vanished from the world stage, his fate uncertain, some whisper of exile, others of assassination, still others of a desperate flight into the East. The Soviet Union, that vast experiment of ideology and steel, has fractured like glass dropped from a great height. German divisions press beyond the Urals, carving lines across endless steppes, their banners planted upon land stretching farther than the eye can see. The heart of Russia beats faintly now, and soon it may cease altogether. In our reality, the Russian winter proved an ally to those who resisted Hitler, wrapping the land in ice and hunger, freezing engines, slowing advances, and breaking the morale of armies unprepared for its merciless embrace. But in this imagined world, the cold comes too late, or the German war machine is better supplied, its railways extended, its soldiers clothed in furs and boots ready for the frost. Factories in Ukraine, food from the fertile black soil, oil from the Caucasus, all fall into German hands. The East, long considered unconquerable, bows beneath the weight of blitzkrieg. This moment, this alternate victory, sends ripples across the globe. Britain, once sustained by the knowledge that the Soviets stood as a second front, now finds itself alone. Imagine Churchill late at night, his study lit by a dim lamp, the smoke from his cigar curling like a restless ghost above piles of maps. Each report brings worse news: Kiev lost, Leningrad silenced, Moscow fallen. He listens to the ticking clock, wondering how much time remains for Britain before the storm crosses the Channel. He knows that isolation has come, before Napoleon's shadow had once loomed across Europe as well, yet this is different. This is modern war. With engines, planes, submarines, alone Britain feels the weight of inevitability pressing upon its island shores. But is any future truly inevitable? Even as German soldiers raise flags over Russian cities, questions hang in the air. Could Britain still endure, nourished by the stubborn spirit of its people, its empire stretching across oceans? Could America, watching from afar, still be drawn into the struggle, even without the Eastern giant to share the burden? Or would exhaustion and fear drive the British to the unthinkable negotiation, compromise, the search for peace on Hitler's terms? The path forks, and we can wander down each in turn. The fall of Russia also reshapes the psychology of Europe. Occupied France, Poland, the Balkans. Their underground movements look eastward for strength, for hope. With Russia gone, those hopes flicker like candles in a draft. Resistance still stirs, but faintly, its faith weakened by the sense that the tide of history has turned forever. Children in Paris whisper that the Germans will rule forever. Farmers in Poland hear the rumble of trains carrying supplies east, never to return. In Berlin, meanwhile, the streets resound with victory parades, drums echoing through avenues where swastikas line every building. The myth of invincibility, cracked after the failure at Moscow in our true history, here grows sharper, brighter, more dangerous. For Hitler himself, this is vindication of his vision, the dream of Lebensraum realized, the conquest of the East secured. In his headquarters, he speaks of a 1,000-year Reich with renewed fervor. Maps of Europe and Asia stretch across the walls, pins marking territories already claimed and those yet to fall. Generals argue logistics, but the man at the center sees destiny. If Russia can be broken, then why not Britain? If Britain falls, then why not America? Each victory becomes a stepping stone across the river of possibility, leading toward a future that to him seems inevitable, yet to us, looking back, is shadowed with both terror and fragility. Yet, in this world, victory in the East does not resolve all challenges. The sheer size of conquered Russia strains the German army. Supply lines stretch across thousands of miles. Partisans hide in forests and mountains, striking at convoys, disappearing like smoke. The Wehrmacht has conquered, but holding is another matter. Still, for now, the image is one of triumph, and the illusion of permanence is powerful. It is this illusion that carries Europe into a darker night. Imagine now the winter of 1942 in London. The Thames reflects dim moonlight, and in air raid shelters families huddle, whispering of the Eastern catastrophe. A mother clutches her child, listening to the distant hum of aircraft engines. Are they German? Not tonight, but soon, perhaps. She wonders if her son will grow up under the Union Jack or under the swastika. The sound of dripping water in the shelter echoes like the slow countdown of time. Somewhere above, Churchill prepares another speech. One more appeal to courage, to endurance. Yet even he feels the shadow creeping closer, the sense that Britain may be facing not only a test of strength, but of survival itself. At this moment, in our alternate world, the question hangs in the air. With Russia fallen, what becomes of Britain? Does it stand defiant, a lonely rock in a storm, or does it bend beneath the weight of a Europe united under German rule? And if it falls, what hope remains for the free world? These are the questions we carry with us, step by step, as we leave the ashes of Moscow behind and turn our gaze westward, toward the Channel, toward the next horizon of fate. The Channel lies dark, restless under the autumn sky, its waves curling in whispers against the cliffs of Dover, as if carrying messages from the continent beyond. On the other side, the iron tide swells ever greater, a Europe already subdued, now crowned by the conquest of Russia. Britain, standing alone, feels like a solitary lantern flickering in the night, its glow visible but fragile in the storm that presses in from every direction. The maps spread across Churchill's table tell a story of encirclement. France subdued, Scandinavia dominated, the Low Countries occupied, the Balkans bound, and now Russia extinguished. Only the island remains, like a stone in a flood, holding its shape for the moment, yet battered by waters that rise with each passing day. The atmosphere in Britain is heavy, charged with the weight of history. For centuries, the island has prided itself on standing apart, protected by seas that shielded it from the turmoil of the continent. But in this imagined world, those seas no longer promise safety. German aircraft patrol the skies above the Channel, submarines prowl beneath the waves, and invasion plans once thought abandoned now stir again in shadowed headquarters. In London, children walk past sandbags piled high against government buildings, their school books clutched tightly, their faces pale with the memory of earlier bombings. The hum of aircraft engines at night still awakens them, though tonight it may only be the wind. The people steel themselves, remembering the long months of the Blitz, yet they sense that what lies ahead could be far worse. Churchill, in these long nights, becomes not just a leader, but a symbol. His voice on the radio carries a cadence that mingles defiance with fatigue, his words chosen carefully to mask the doubts gnawing at his own heart. He tells his people they will fight on the beaches, in the fields, in the streets, but when he looks at the balance sheets of aircraft, of ships, of men, he knows the odds grow longer with every report from the east. Without the Soviets bleeding Germany on the vast frontiers, all of Hitler's might may now turn westward. Each factory in Germany, fueled by resources plundered from Ukraine, coal from Poland, oil from the Caucasus, now produces weapons that may one day thunder across British soil. And yet, Britain has stood alone before. There is in the air a memory of an older struggle, when Napoleon's armies dominated the continent and the Royal Navy stood as the final barrier. The British psyche draws strength from these echoes of the past, the sense that islands endure when empires overreach. In pubs and in shelters, ordinary men and women murmur comparisons to Trafalgar, to Waterloo, to Elizabeth's sailors defying the Armada. But under these reassurances lies a quiet fear. The fear that this time the tide of history may not repeat itself, but drown them instead. The empire beyond Britain stretches vast, yet distance is a double-edged sword. India, Africa, Canada, Australia, all still loyal, yet how secure can they remain if the heart of the empire is pierced? Supplies and reinforcements may flow from across the seas, but the lifeline of the Atlantic is strained. German U-boats glide silently through cold waters, hunting convoys, striking without warning. Each sunken ship means not only lost cargo, but a reminder that Britain's survival depends on fragile threads stretched thin across oceans. In Canada, factories hum to supply the war effort. In Australia, troops drill in heat and dust. In India, voices rise both for the empire and against it, some demanding freedom while others pledge loyalty. The empire is both a source of strength and a burden, a reminder that Britain carries not only its own fate but that of millions under its banner. In Washington, Roosevelt follows these events with furrowed brow. America's people are divided. Some cry for aid to Britain, others for isolation. The Japanese threat in the Pacific already tugs at American attention, and now the fall of Russia has changed the calculation. Without the Eastern giant, the question presses heavily. Should America pour its strength into the Atlantic to hold the line against Germany, or should it fortify its Pacific holdings against the rising sun? These debates are quiet now, but in our imagined world they soon grow louder, the fate of Britain shaping the fate of America itself. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hitler's advisors weigh options with sharpened ambition. Some urge consolidation, warning of overextension, while others whisper of opportunity. The invasion of Britain, once judged too risky after the failure of the Luftwaffe to gain supremacy, now appears within reach. With Russia subdued, resources may be concentrated on airfields, on fleets, on preparations for crossing the narrow sea. Operation Sea Lion, the plan once mothballed, is dusted off, re-examined, redrawn with confidence, born of victory. In Hitler's eyes, Britain is the last stone in Europe's mosaic, and once it falls, the continent will belong to him entire. But plans on paper differ from reality. The channel is treacherous, its tides unpredictable, its storms fierce. British coastal defenses, while stretched, remain formidable. The Royal Air Force, bloodied but unbroken, waits in its airfields, pilots hardened by years of combat. The Royal Navy, though battered, still controls the seas. For every German soldier dreaming of marching through London, there is a British sailor ready to sink the barges that might carry them. The clash, should it come, promises to be desperate, brutal, and decisive. Imagine the mood of the British people in this shadowed hour. In the streets of London, posters declare courage and endurance, yet whispers in the shelters reveal doubt. Some ask quietly whether survival lies not in defiance but in negotiation, in seeking terms that might preserve the island, though at the cost of freedom. Others reject such thoughts with fury, vowing never to submit, no matter the price. The nation's spirit is a patchwork of steel and fear, of unyielding pride and human exhaustion. It is this tension, this fragile balance, that defines Britain in the imagined year of 1942. As night falls over the island, the searchlights sweep across the skies, tracing arcs of silver against the dark. Somewhere above, the stars remain steady, indifferent to the struggles below. The hum of distant engines may be only the wind, but in the hearts of the people, it sounds like the future itself approaching. And so Britain waits, a solitary lantern glowing against the encroaching dark, uncertain whether its light will endure or be extinguished. And as Britain waits, across the Atlantic the question deepens. Will America come? Across the wide Atlantic, the ocean stretches vast and silent, broken only by the wakes of convoys and the hidden trails of submarines. In Washington, the White House glows faintly against the night, its windows lit while much of the Capitol lies in slumber. Inside, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt sits at his desk, his shoulders bent beneath the weight of decisions that span continents. He listens to the reports brought to him. Russia has collapsed, the German flag now flies over Moscow, and Hitler speaks confidently of a Europe united under his rule. Britain, once supported by the endurance of the Soviets, now stands alone. And so Roosevelt asks himself the question that haunts him in the quiet hours. Should America step fully into this war, or should it hold back, guarding its own shores while Europe remakes itself in fire? The American people are not of one mind. In the towns of the Midwest, families gather around radios, their hearts heavy with the news from overseas, but their voices insistent that America should not spill blood for distant wars. Mothers remember the sons lost in the trenches of 1917, crosses row upon row in French fields, and they whisper that such sacrifice must not be repeated. Farmers speak of their harvests, workers of their wages, young men of their uncertain futures. Why, they ask, should America bear the burden of saving Europe again, especially now that Europe seems lost already? And yet, in the bustling cities of the coast, there are other voices. New York, Boston, San Francisco, places tied closely to Europe by history, commerce, and culture, feel the tremors more deeply. Newspapers there thunder warnings. If Britain falls, the Atlantic will no longer shield America. German fleets could soon prowl its waters openly. German bombers could one day darken its skies. Business leaders calculate grimly. A Europe dominated by Germany would command resources, industries, and markets that could challenge America's economic power for generations. To them, the war is not only about ideals, but about survival in a world order, where the Reich might stretch from the Urals to the Atlantic, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean. Roosevelt himself embodies this tension. His instincts, shaped by long years of politics and a sense of global vision, tell him that America cannot remain untouched. He looks at the map on his wall, the vast oceans shrinking in the age of aviation, and he knows isolation is an illusion. Yet he must weigh these instincts against the reality of public opinion, against the Congress hesitant to authorize war, against the memories of the Depression still fresh in the minds of millions. He speaks carefully, choosing words that prepare the ground for action without rushing into it. Lend-Lease has already sent supplies to Britain, but now, with Russia gone, even those shipments feel like drops in an ocean of need. What if Roosevelt waits too long? Imagine a scenario in which Britain, cut off and exhausted, negotiates with Germany before America commits. Perhaps Churchill, pressed by his cabinet, offers terms that preserve British sovereignty in exchange for recognizing German dominance on the continent. Such an agreement would send shockwaves across the Atlantic. America would find itself facing a Europe where resistance has collapsed, where every harbor might serve the Reich, where the balance of power has already tipped beyond recovery. Would America then retreat into isolation, accepting a hemisphere divided, or would it still rise, even against such overwhelming odds? And yet there is another possibility. Imagine instead that Roosevelt acts sooner, seizing the moment to rally the American people, framing the struggle not as Europe's war but as a battle for the very principles upon which his nation was built. He might speak of freedom, of democracy, of the danger of tyranny unchecked. His words, broadcast by radio across millions of homes, might stir hearts weary of conflict but still alive with conviction. Factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh could shift into higher gear, producing tanks, planes, and ships, not for sale, but for American soldiers. Young men might line up at recruiting offices, their futures uncertain but their sense of duty clear. In such a world, America would step into the storm, not hesitantly, but decisively, bringing with it the weight of an industrial giant unchallenged in scale. The dilemma grows sharper when one considers the Pacific. Even as Roosevelt watches Europe, his gaze cannot leave the East. Japan stands restless, its ambitions stretching across China, its fleets prowling the Pacific. If America commits too fully to Europe, does it risk leaving its flank exposed to Japanese expansion? If it hesitates, does it lose the chance to strike at Germany before Britain collapses? The tension between two oceans, between two potential wars, is a strain that few leaders could bear. In our imagined timeline, this strain grows even heavier with the fall of Russia, for the arithmetic of war has changed. Without the Soviets, the balance tilts alarmingly toward the Axis. Across the American heartland, radio voices debate endlessly. Isolationists warn of entanglement, interventionists speak of destiny, town halls echo with arguments, newspapers fill with editorials, church pulpits resound with prayers both for peace and for strength. The nation seems caught between two pulses, one that beats with fear of loss, another that beats with hope of action. Each passing week tips the scales, for Britain grows weaker, Germany stronger, and the oceans narrower. In London, Churchill sends cables across the sea urging Roosevelt to act, painting pictures of looming disaster. "Give us the tools," he had once said, "and we will finish the job." But now his words shift subtly. Without America, Britain may not finish the job at all. His appeals are both strategic and emotional, invoking the shared heritage of language, law, and liberty that bind the two nations. He knows that America may be Britain's last hope, the one ally capable of shifting the balance before the tide becomes irreversible. And so, in the autumn of this imagined year, the question lingers over Washington like a storm cloud that refuses to break. Roosevelt walks the halls of the White House, his mind filled with maps and speeches, his heart torn between prudence and urgency. Outside, the city prepares for winter, unaware that the decisions made in these rooms may determine not only the fate of Britain, but the fate of the entire world. As the Atlantic grows darker with U-boats, as Britain waits with flickering courage, America stands at the threshold of choice. And beyond this threshold, across the Channel, the German High Command sharpens its plans, eyes fixed on the island that has defied them still. The Channel at night is a black mirror, stretching between Britain and the continent, its waters calm one moment and treacherous the next. In Berlin, maps are unrolled, compasses circle upon the table, and voices of generals rise in debate. Operation Sea Lion, once dismissed as a gamble too costly, now returns to the center of strategy. With Russia fallen, divisions freed from the Eastern Front stand ready, veterans hardened by victories in the steppes. To Hitler, the Channel appears no longer as a barrier, but as the final threshold to a Europe complete. Britain remains the last defiant island, and if it can be subdued, then the Reich's dominion will stretch unbroken from the Atlantic coast to the distant Ural Mountains. The German High Command studies the lessons of failure from 1940. Then, the Luftwaffe could not break the Royal Air Force, nor gain the skies necessary for a crossing. But now, with the resources of conquered Russia feeding its factories, with thousands of aircraft rolling from assembly lines, the calculation appears different. Airfields across northern France hum with preparation, runways crowded with sleek fighters and heavy bombers. Along the coast, barges are collected, naval engineers strengthen hulls, and rehearsals for landings begin. The beaches of Normandy and Calais echo with drills, as soldiers practice storming defenses built from sand and wire. For the first time since Caesar crossed 2 millennia before, the thought of invasion stirs seriously again, yet the Channel is not easily tamed. German admirals remind their Führer that the Royal Navy, though battered, remains a formidable force. Battleships lie in harbor, destroyers patrol relentlessly, and the British have mines laid thick beneath the waters. Every barge loaded with men would be a fragile shell, vulnerable to torpedoes, to artillery, to storms themselves. To offset this, the Luftwaffe promises total supremacy, swearing that squadrons will shield the convoys, drive the Royal Navy from the sea, and smash coastal defenses before the first soldier steps ashore. In the corridors of power, paper victories appear assured, each obstacle reduced to a problem of numbers and will. Across the Channel, Britain watches. Radar stations sweep the skies, coastal observers scan the horizon, and Churchill's cabinet receives intelligence that German preparations grow more feverish with each passing week. In London, the mood turns tense once more, for the island remembers the terror of the Blitz and now imagines something worse, not bombs from above, but boots upon the ground. Posters urge vigilance, sirens are tested, and civil defense drills resume with renewed urgency. Families stock cellars with tinned food, while children rehearse evacuation routes that might carry them to distant countryside. The sense of waiting grows heavy, as though the entire nation breathes shallowly, expecting thunder to break at any moment. Imagine a night in Dover, the sea hidden by fog, the silence broken only by the cry of gulls. Soldiers crouch in pillboxes, rifles clutched, staring into darkness. Somewhere across that narrow stretch of water, hundreds of barges may already be assembling, their engines muted, their decks crowded with men eager for conquest. Each soldier on the British coast feels the weight of history pressing upon him, the knowledge that if the invasion comes, it will be his small patch of sand, his bunker, his trigger finger, that stands between freedom and subjugation. The cliffs rise behind them like silent guardians, yet even they seem fragile against the might gathering in the east. In Berlin, Hitler dreams of spectacle. He imagines himself crossing the Channel in triumph, standing upon the white cliffs of Dover, then entering London as conqueror. His mind fills with visions of parades through Trafalgar Square, of Union Jacks torn down and replaced by swastikas, of the empire humiliated before his eyes. He speaks of Britain as an outdated relic, a lion whose teeth are broken, and he assures his generals that its end is inevitable. Yet beneath his certainty lies a truth his advisors cannot erase. No German soldier has yet set foot upon that hostile shore. The invasion plan becomes more than military calculation. It becomes a test of will. Germany believes its victories in Poland, France, and Russia have proven destiny, that momentum itself ensures success. But momentum is not mastery, and the Channel is not the steppes. Weather alone could turn triumph to tragedy, as storms scatter fleets and ground aircraft. The Royal Navy, wounded but unyielding, could still strike with devastating force, cutting lines of supply, drowning thousands before they reach the sand. The RAF, though outnumbered, remains determined, its pilots hardened by years of combat, their skill unmatched. Britain's survival may depend not on numbers, but on resilience, on the stubborn refusal to yield. Imagine the days before the invasion. The people of Britain walk through streets where sandbags line every wall, where barbed wire curls across green parks, where statues of kings and poets look down upon trenches dug hastily among the flowers. Children carry gas masks in small cardboard boxes. Women knit socks for soldiers. Men drill with wooden rifles if steel ones are not available. A quiet unity binds them, born not of certainty but of necessity. They do not know if their island can resist, but they know it must, and in this knowledge lies a kind of strength that no calculation can measure. Meanwhile, in America, Roosevelt follows each report with sharpened concern. If Britain falls to invasion, what then? Would America face a world where no friendly port remains in Europe, where the Atlantic becomes a barrier not against tyranny but against freedom itself? The president considers whether his nation can afford to wait, or whether the invasion itself will be the spark that forces America's entry into the storm. In this way, the Channel does not divide merely Britain and Germany. It divides the future of the world, holding in its narrow waters the fate of continents. And so, as barges gather, as aircraft engines roar to life, as soldiers steel themselves for what may come, the world waits with bated breath. Will the black mirror of the Channel reflect the triumph of conquest, or the ruin of ambition? Will Britain stand, or will it fall into silence like the rest of Europe? The answers remain hidden in the mists, in the winds, in the hearts of those who stand watch upon the cliffs. The lantern of Britain still burns, flickering against the darkness. But if German boots touch its soil, will that lantern gutter out or blaze brighter than ever before? The first rumble begins not with footsteps on the beaches, but with the drone of engines overhead. Before dawn, the skies above southern England growl with the weight of hundreds of aircraft. The Luftwaffe's formations blackening the horizon. Searchlights sweep upward, anti-aircraft guns cough flame into the darkness, and the ground trembles beneath the thunder of bombs falling once more upon London, Portsmouth, Dover. For the people of Britain, it is a familiar terror, yet in this imagined world it carries a heavier shadow, for now the bombardment is not a campaign of harassment, but the prelude to invasion. The sky itself becomes a vast drum beaten by explosions, echoing across fields and rivers, rattling windows miles from the blast. In the underground shelters, families huddle together, listening to the distant crashes and the nearer ones that shake dust from the ceilings. A child presses his face into his mother's coat, muffling the sound, while an old man mutters a prayer he has not spoken in years. The air smells of damp concrete and fear, yet also of determination, for even here in the bowels of the earth, there is the sense that Britain's fate hangs on endurance. Candles flicker in jars, casting long shadows against the walls, shadows that seem to dance like ghosts of those already lost. Above, the bombs carve fresh scars upon the city, fires rising in columns of smoke that turn the morning sky to a dull orange. And then, amid the bombardment, whispers begin. Landings reported along the southern coast, barges sighted through the mist, German troops pouring onto beaches once thought impregnable. The defenders rushed to meet them, machine guns stuttering, mortars belching flame, the crash of rifles and grenades mingling with the roar of artillery from the cliffs. The sea runs dark with oil and blood as ships sink and barges burn, but still more arrive, wave upon wave, driven by the certainty of orders and the promise of victory. For each barge destroyed, another finds the shore, disgorging men who surge forward, their boots sinking into sand already churned by combat. The battle for the beaches becomes chaos incarnate. British soldiers fight with the desperation of those who know there is no retreat, only the line behind them where families sleep. Germans push inland, seizing bunkers, raising flags atop cliffs, pressing toward villages whose church bells now toll, not for worship but as alarms. Civilians flee through fields, clutching what belongings they can carry, while some take up arms, joining hastily formed militias. The land itself groans with the weight of invasion, every hedge and lane echoing with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded, yet the outcome remains uncertain. The Royal Navy, alerted by radar and scouts, steams southward with guns blazing, intercepting convoys, scattering barges, tearing holes in the invasion fleet. The sea becomes a graveyard of twisted metal, bodies drifting in the swell. Above, the RAF dives from the clouds, its Spitfires and Hurricanes striking with ferocity born of desperation, strafing columns, dueling Messerschmitts in lethal spirals. The sky becomes a storm, of fire and smoke, each plane a streak of courage or of doom. In this maelstrom, Britain's survival hangs by the slenderest thread, the courage of pilots, the accuracy of gunners, the stamina of exhausted men along the coast. In London, Churchill waits for reports, pacing like a caged lion in the cabinet war rooms. Each message carries the weight of the nation's future. Enemy troops advancing at Dover, Navy intercepting invasion force, RAF engaged over Channel. His face, usually so controlled, now betrays the strain of hours that may decide centuries. He drafts a speech to rally the people, should the invaders reach London itself, a speech filled with defiance, vowing that the city would burn before it surrendered. In his hand trembles a glass of brandy, and in his heart flickers the knowledge that Britain's fate may already be decided on fields and waters beyond his reach. For the civilians, the invasion is more than maps and speeches. It is the sound of boots on cobblestones, the sight of smoke rising from their own villages. A farmer in Kent sees German soldiers crossing his fields, their helmets glinting in the sun, and he feels both fury and helplessness. A nurse in London tends the wounded by candlelight, her hands trembling as she binds wounds she knows may never heal. Children evacuated to the countryside hear the distant guns and wonder if home will still exist when they return. The invasion is not only a military struggle, but a tearing of the fabric of daily life, the intrusion of war into the hearth, the garden, the schoolyard. And yet, even as German columns push inland, the question remains unsettled. Can they hold what they seize? Britain's defenders fight with a ferocity born of desperation, their resolve stiffened by the knowledge that behind them lies not only land but liberty. Every mile gained by the invader is paid for with blood, every village becomes a fortress, every hedge a barricade. The very soil seems to resist, bogging down vehicles, confusing maps, concealing ambushes. For every German advance, a British counterattack waits, fierce and unrelenting. What if the Germans succeed? Imagine the swastika flying from Parliament, the Union Jack torn down, Churchill captured or driven into exile. The image chills the imagination. Britain transformed into another occupied state, its people silenced, its empire adrift. German troops parading through London would mark not only a military triumph, but a psychological one, shattering the myth of Britain's invulnerability. Across the world, colonies would waver, America would hesitate, and the dream of a free Europe would dim. But what if the invasion falters? Imagine instead the beaches littered with wreckage, the channel filled with burning ships, the Luftwaffe bloodied and turned back by the RAF. The German army, so confident after Russia, might find itself broken on the shores of an island too stubborn to fall. Such a defeat could echo like thunder across Europe, inspiring resistance, shaking the illusion of German invincibility, buying time for America to act. The invasion, in this scenario, becomes not Britain's end, but Germany's greatest mistake, the moment when ambition overreaches and destiny begins to fracture. The truth of this imagined battle is that its outcome is never certain. In the labyrinth of possibilities, Britain may fall, or it may stand, and in each path the world that follows is changed beyond recognition. The only certainty is the courage of those who lived through it, the civilians in shelters, the sailors at sea, the pilots in the sky, the soldiers in the fields, each a thread in the tapestry of survival, each carrying the weight of history upon their shoulders. And as Britain bleeds in this struggle, the question grows louder in distant halls. What of the empire beyond the island? If Britain falls, can Canada, India, Australia, Africa remain loyal, or will the empire itself unravel under the weight of defeat? Far from the Channel's dark waters and the burning streets of London, the British Empire stretches like a great web across the globe, its strands connecting continents and oceans, its weight measured not only in land, but in people, in cultures, in countless lives bound beneath the Union Jack. In this imagined world, where German boots press into English soil, or at the very least threaten to, the question is not only the fate of the island, but the endurance of this empire. For what is Britain without its empire? And what is the empire without its island heart? In Canada, the war is watched with both loyalty and apprehension. Factories in Ontario and Quebec hum with the production of munitions, rifles, aircraft, steel lifelines meant to cross the Atlantic and bolster the mother country. Canadian soldiers already fight in Europe and North Africa, their graves scattered across foreign soil. Yet if Britain falls, what then? Would Canada, tied by language and heritage, continue the fight alone, perhaps alongside America? Or would distance and exhaustion pull it into a reluctant peace, a dominion adrift without the guidance of London? In cities like Toronto, citizens gather around radios, straining to hear the fate of Britain, their voices hushed, for they know that the Empire's heartbeat, though faint, still pulses within their own chests. Across the vastness of India, the situation is more complex, more fragile. For decades, calls for independence have grown louder, woven through the speeches of Gandhi, the Congress Party, and countless movements demanding freedom. Britain's presence, though long established, rests upon a precarious balance of authority and negotiation. Now, as news of German triumph spreads, some see opportunity in Britain's weakness. If the empire falters at home, might not the jewel of the crown slip free at last? Demonstrations swell in cities like Calcutta and Bombay, voices raised in both defiance and hope. Yet at the same time, Indian soldiers march beneath the Union Jack, fighting in deserts and jungles, bound by loyalty, duty, or necessity. The Empire's strength lies not only in London's command, but in the service of millions from its colonies, and their role becomes even more uncertain as Britain itself teeters on the brink. In Africa, the Empire's territories stretch from Cairo to Cape Town, from the Gold Coast to Kenya. Here too, the war reshapes life. In North Africa, German and Italian armies press against British defenses, their eyes fixed on the Suez Canal, the lifeline between Europe and Asia. If Britain falls, the canal may fall with it, and with it control of the Mediterranean, leaving the Empire's eastern reaches exposed. African soldiers, drawn from across the continent, serve in regiments that fight in deserts and savannas, their courage woven into the Empire's defense. Yet the memory of colonial rule, of hardship and subjugation, lingers strongly. Should the Empire collapse, might these voices rise, demanding independence, sooner, louder, fiercer? In Australia and New Zealand, distance provides no comfort. The Pacific looms as a theater of its own, where Japan's ambitions grow bold. For Australians, loyalty to Britain has always been fierce, yet loyalty cannot shield them from geography. If Britain succumbs to invasion, Australians know their fate may depend less upon London and more upon Washington. Already their leaders calculate grimly, if Britain is no longer the anchor, must the United States become the new protector? The possibility of a world where the Union Jack no longer flies above them feels both unthinkable and yet increasingly real. The Empire, then, is a mirror reflecting Britain's own fragility. Each dominion, each colony, each territory wonders silently, can the Empire survive without its core? Some imagine a federation that endures, bound by shared history even if the island is lost. Others see dissolution, each fragment drifting into independence, leaving only memories of a world once ruled from London. The fall of Britain would not only change maps, but hearts, altering identities, shattering illusions of permanence. And yet, survival too carries its own consequences. If Britain holds against invasion, if it defies Germany even as Russia lies fallen, the Empire may emerge bloodied but unbroken. This endurance could strengthen bonds, proving that the Empire is not merely a relic of the past, but a living force capable of standing against tyranny. Canada would remain steadfast, India's independence might be delayed, Australia reassured, Africa still bound within London's orbit. The Empire might stagger, but it would not collapse, its endurance a testament to the stubborn flame of resistance. Consider the symbolism. A vast empire held together by an island besieged. It is a paradox that defines this alternate world. For the farther one travels from Britain's shores, the more the empire depends upon the illusion of British strength. Should that illusion crack, distant lands may question their loyalty, their sacrifice, their future. Should it hold, the empire may yet survive long enough for allies across the ocean to join the struggle. In the corridors of Berlin, Hitler dreams not only of conquering Britain, but of dismantling its empire piece by piece. He imagines German soldiers marching through Cairo, oil from the Middle East flowing into Reich pipelines, Indian nationalists rising in revolt against weakened British rulers. The empire's collapse would not only grant him Europe, but open the path to Africa and Asia, reshaping the global order entirely. To him, the empire is not merely Britain's strength but its vulnerability, a structure too vast to endure the collapse of its foundation. For the people living under that empire, the uncertainty breeds both hope and dread. Some dream of liberation, imagining that Britain's weakness might be the catalyst for independence. Others fear the vacuum, for if the empire collapses, who or what will replace it? German influence? Japanese expansion? Chaos of local wars? The empire may be oppressive, but it is also a structure, and structures, however flawed, hold the weight of daily life. Without it, the world may fracture into instability as dangerous as conquest itself. Thus, the fate of the empire becomes entwined with the fate of the world. If it falls, the balance of power shifts irreversibly toward the axis, creating a globe where tyranny reigns unchallenged. If it endures, however narrowly, it may buy time for America, for resistance, for the possibility of a different outcome. The empire, vast and diverse, becomes both pawn and player in this global game, its survival contingent upon an island's lantern burning still. And so, as the bombs fall on London and the barges cross the channel, faraway lands hold their breath. In the rice fields of Bengal, in the wheat fields of Canada, in the deserts of Africa, in the bush of Australia, eyes turn toward Britain, waiting to see whether the empire's heart will beat or be stilled. For if Britain falls, the empire may scatter like leaves in the wind. If Britain stands, the empire may hold together, fragile yet enduring. But Europe itself, bound in chains, offers another image of capitals subdued, of streets silenced, of cultures under the shadow of swastikas. And in this vision lies the next question. What does a continent ruled by Germany truly look like? Imagine Europe in this alternate world, where German banners unfurl not only across Paris but across Moscow as well, where the Reich's reach stretches unbroken from the Atlantic coast to the eastern steppes. The map is no longer a mosaic of nations, but a single canvas painted in shades of black, red, and white, the swastika stamped upon cities once proud of their independence. In the streets of Warsaw, the sound of boots on cobblestones is constant, rhythmic, relentless. In the boulevards of Paris, cafes remain open but muted, their conversations hushed, shadows of Gestapo patrols flickering in the lamplight. Rome, Budapest, Bucharest, all speak in whispers, their governments bent to Berlin's will, their destinies scripted by distant commands. This Europe appears orderly on the surface, yet beneath the veneer lies tension as sharp as a knife's edge. German administrators speak of a new order, a continent unified under their authority, efficient, disciplined, inevitable. Railways run on time, factories churn ceaselessly, and propaganda posters promise prosperity in exchange for obedience. But prosperity is uneven, cruelly selective, designed not for the people of conquered lands but for the Reich itself. Grain from Ukraine, coal from Poland, oil from the Caucasus all flow westward, feeding German industry while local populations endure hunger, shortages, despair. The continent is not a partnership, but a pyramid, with the Reich enthroned at its apex, and millions of others reduced to labor and silence beneath. Walk the streets of Paris in this imagined year, and you will see the paradox clearly. The Seine still glitters beneath its bridges, the Louvre still stands, the bells of Notre Dame still toll. Yet the city's soul is subdued, its art stifled, its voice muted. German soldiers stroll through gardens where lovers once walked, their laughter coarse, their presence constant. The French police cooperate, some willingly, others reluctantly, while resistance lurks in shadows, uncertain if hope remains now that Russia is no more. To tourists from Berlin, Paris seems conquered, docile, tamed. To Parisians themselves, it feels like a dream half-lived, a nightmare that has become daily life. Further east, the picture darkens. In Warsaw, Prague, and Kiev, fear saturates the air. The Jewish ghettos remain prisons of despair, their walls rising like tombstones, their inhabitants condemned not merely to exclusion, but to annihilation. Forced labor, trains roll endlessly toward German factories, their passengers herded like cattle, stripped not only of freedom, but of dignity. Villages in the east, once alive with music and harvest, stand silent, their fields seized, their people driven away or worse. The German dream of Lebensraum takes shape here most brutally. A vision of land cleansed for colonization, where the plow of the conqueror buries the memory of those who once lived. And yet, even in this Europe of silence, resistance flickers. In basements beneath Paris, pamphlets circulate secretly, carrying words of defiance. In forests of Poland, partisans strike railways, vanish into shadows, return to strike again. In the ruins of villages across Ukraine, whispers pass from ear to ear, telling of German failures, of the possibility, however faint, that the tide might one day turn. Resistance is fragile, often futile, crushed with ruthless reprisals, but it endures, a reminder that domination is never absolute, that beneath the boot there is always the spark of defiance waiting for breath. For ordinary people, life is defined by compromises and fears. A baker in Brussels must decide whether to serve German officers or risk suspicion. A teacher in Prague censors his lessons, omitting lines of poetry that might be deemed dangerous. A musician in Budapest plays German marches in a grand hall, though in his heart he remembers songs of freedom. Across the continent, the rhythm of daily life continues, but it is life under occupation, bent and broken, haunted by choices no one wished to make. In Berlin, the illusion of permanence grows. Hitler proclaims that the war is won, that Europe belongs to him forever. Rallies fill stadiums, the people intoxicated by triumph, cheering as though destiny itself had been fulfilled. Propaganda films show smiling workers, orderly streets, conquered cities, brought into the family of nations. Yet beneath the surface, cracks begin to form. German soldiers garrisoned far from home grow weary, burdened by the endless task of occupation. Supplies, though abundant, must cross vast distances, each mile vulnerable to sabotage, each convoy a target. The Reich has achieved domination, but maintaining it proves a burden as great as conquest. Still, the vision of Nazi Europe is terrifying in its scope. Imagine a continent where borders vanish beneath the weight of dictatorship, where diversity is crushed into uniformity, where art, science, and thought itself bend to ideology. Imagine children in Paris, Warsaw, Athens, taught to salute the swastika, their histories rewritten to glorify their conquerors. Imagine universities purged of dissent, libraries stripped of forbidden books, theaters performing only what the Reich approves. A continent once alive with voices, philosophies, and ideas becomes a monotone, a choir singing only one song. And yet the question lingers, could such a system endure? History teaches that empires built on fear may glitter brightly but often burn out quickly, their own weight dragging them into collapse. The Reich's Europe appears strong, but strength is brittle when it silences too many voices. Each act of resistance, each whispered rumor of rebellion, each hidden pamphlet is a thread tugging at the fabric of control. In our imagined world, with Russia broken and Britain besieged, perhaps these threads remain weak, yet they exist, and history itself suggests that one day they may be woven into something stronger. For now, however, Europe stands subdued. Capitals once proud bow their heads, churches ring under the watchful eye of soldiers, and fields yield their harvest not to local families but to distant masters. The continent breathes, but it breathes under constraint, every inhalation cautious, every exhalation measured. It is a world where silence reigns louder than sound, where absence is felt more keenly than presence, where the true music of Europe, its freedom, its variety, Its spirit lies muted beneath the iron march of occupation. And in the east, in the boundless plains now ruled from Berlin, the vision darkens further still. Colonization, hunger, displacement. These are the instruments of empire, wielded not only against nations, but against entire peoples. Here, the true cost of victory becomes clear, for the soil itself is carved into a blueprint of conquest, a land stripped to feed an empire, its future reshaped by force. The east stretches boundless, a horizon without end, its fields once green with wheat and rye, its forests alive with songbirds and villages, its rivers winding like silver threads through black earth. In this imagined world, the Reich now claims it all, declaring the lands from Poland to the Urals as their destined inheritance. Here the dream of Lebensraum takes shape not as an idea, but as a policy, not as rhetoric, but as lived reality. German administrators, soldiers, and settlers arrive with maps and orders, their pens and rifles carving new borders, their vision of empire unfolding upon the backs of millions who call this land home. The Hunger Plan, once theorized in secret meetings, now becomes grim practice. Grain is requisitioned not for the mouths of local families, but for German supply lines, for the cities of the Reich, for the soldiers who patrol endlessly. In villages across Ukraine, barns stand empty while children grow thin, their ribs visible through torn shirts, their eyes wide with hunger. Mothers trade precious heirlooms for a crust of bread, fathers steal silently from fields guarded by men with rifles. The soil that once fed empires now becomes a weapon, its bounty denied to those who live upon it, redirected to fuel the machinery of conquest. German settlers arrive in convoys, escorted by soldiers. They bring with them not only possessions but a sense of entitlement, taught that this land is theirs by right, promised as part of the 1,000-year Reich. Houses abandoned or seized become their homes. Schools are reopened with German teachers. Signs change language overnight. For the displaced, there is no appeal, only orders, only silence. Entire villages are cleared, their people marched to camps or simply scattered to wander, their names struck from records. Forests swallow the traces of their lives, and the land itself begins to forget them. And yet the land resists, stubbornly and quietly. In the forests, partisans gather, their weapons old, but their resolve sharp. They strike supply lines, ambush convoys, vanish like smoke into the trees. Their presence forces the occupiers to divert troops, to patrol endlessly, to live in constant fear of the unseen. A German officer may dine in a requisitioned farmhouse, yet in the dark he listens for footsteps outside, for whispers in a language he does not understand, for the sudden crack of a rifle. The vastness of the East, so tempting as a conquest, proves also a curse, for its size cannot be tamed by maps or orders alone. For the conquered peoples, life becomes a blur of survival and loss. A child in Kiev learns to read German words before she learns her own, her native songs forbidden, her family's history erased from textbooks. A farmer in Smolensk tills soil that no longer belongs to him, his harvest taken by men who speak of destiny while his own children starve. In the Baltic states, schools teach obedience, churches are shuttered or reshaped, traditions suppressed. The cultural tapestry of the East, woven over centuries, is torn thread by thread, replaced by the monotone of conquest. Yet even in this bleak vision, resilience flickers. Families whisper stories by candlelight, teaching their children songs forbidden in public. Priests conduct secret services in barns, their hymns muffled but heartfelt. Writers hide manuscripts beneath floorboards, poets commit verses to memory, partisans carry tales across forests like seeds. The Reich may command silence, but silence is never absolute. Beneath the surface, the East remembers itself, waiting for a time when memory can once again rise to the light. The brutality of colonization extends not only to culture, but to existence itself. Entire populations are marked for displacement or destruction, deemed unfit to share the future the Reich envisions. Camps multiply, their fences stretching across fields, their chimneys smoking against the sky. The Holocaust, already horrific in our true history, deepens further in this alternate path, its scale unbound by the collapse of the Soviet front. Millions more are swept into its machinery, their voices silenced, their absence carved into the land like scars. The East becomes not only a conquered territory, but a graveyard, its soil soaked with both blood and ashes. And yet, in Berlin, the reports speak not of tragedy, but of progress. Administrators record quotas met, fields harvested, trains delivered on time. They speak of villages resettled, of territories reorganized, of roads built to connect new German provinces. They envision highways stretching eastward, railways carrying settlers and soldiers, cities rebuilt as models of German order. On paper, the dream appears to unfold seamlessly. On the ground, it is written in suffering, in hunger, in silence. This colonization, however, carries within it the seeds of strain. The more land the Reich seizes, the more soldiers it must deploy to hold it. The more it extracts, the more resentment it breeds. For every train of grain sent west, more partisans rise in the forests. For every family displaced, more children grow up with memories of hatred. The Reich believes itself eternal, but the East whispers otherwise, its vastness unconquerable, its people unyielding even in defeat. Imagine standing in a Ukrainian field at sunset, the sky ablaze with color, the earth rich and dark beneath your feet. The beauty of the land is undeniable, yet all around lie ruins, empty houses, echoes of voices silenced. The fields feed armies far away, while the villagers nearby starve. The sun sets upon a horizon that stretches endlessly, and you cannot help but wonder, can any empire, no matter how ruthless, truly hold such a vast and unwilling land? For Hitler, the conquest of the East is the pinnacle of his vision. It is here that his ideology finds its cruelest expression, here that the Reich imagines its future. Yet in pursuing this dream, he binds Germany to a struggle without end, a war not only of armies but of peoples, of memory, of existence itself. The East is conquered in this imagined timeline, yet it is never truly subdued. It becomes both the symbol of victory and the harbinger of eventual strain, a triumph that may carry within it the seeds of destruction. And as the East suffers beneath the weight of colonization, questions arise in the shadows. Will resistance remain fragmented, or will it grow into something larger, something capable of shaking even the might of the Reich? Beneath the occupied surface of Europe, where swastikas hang from balconies and German patrols march in steady rhythm, another world breathes in shadow. It is the world of the underground, the resistance that refuses to vanish even as the Reich proclaims its dominion eternal. In this imagined Europe, where Russia has fallen and Britain itself teeters, resistance does not die. It transforms, becoming quieter, more desperate, yet no less determined. In the dim light of cellars, in the whisper of forest camps, in the coded messages passed hand to hand, the pulse of defiance still beats. In Paris, the cafes that by day serve German officers become at night the meeting places of conspirators. A folded newspaper left on a table, a word spoken with careful emphasis, a chalk mark on a lamppost, these become signals of life in the underground. Pamphlets circulate secretly, typed on hidden machines, their words fragile but powerful. France is not finished. Resist, endure. Each sheet of paper carries with it the risk of death, for discovery means arrest, torture, execution. Yet still the words spread, carried by hands that tremble but do not let go. In Warsaw, the resistance takes another form. Here the struggle is rawer, harsher, a matter of survival. Partisans armed with little more than pistols or stolen rifles strike at German patrols, derail trains, sabotage supply lines. The reprisals are immediate, and brutal villages burned, hostages shot, entire neighborhoods razed. Yet still the partisans rise again, fueled not by hope of quick victory, but by the conviction that submission is impossible, that to live without resistance is no life at all. In forests surrounding the city, camps grow in secret. young men and women learning to fight with whatever weapons they can find, their lives consumed by a war fought in shadows. Across the east, resistance movements spread like veins through the soil. In Ukraine, peasants hide partisans in barns, feed them with scraps though their own children go hungry. In Belarus, entire villages vanish into forests, taking up arms, building communities that live half as soldiers, half as refugees. In the Baltic states, coded radios transmit messages to London if London still listens, reporting on German troop movements, pleading for supplies, for recognition, for hope. Each message is a thread in a fragile web, one that could be torn apart by betrayal, by capture, by the inexorable weight of German power. And yet, the underground does more than fight. It remembers. In Prague, a teacher banned from his school gathers children in secret, teaching them songs and stories forbidden by the occupiers, keeping alive the flame of culture. In Athens, poets recite verses quietly in taverns, their words coded, their meanings understood only by those who share the dream of freedom. In Amsterdam, families hide those marked for destruction, risking everything to preserve a single life. Each act, no matter how small, becomes a rebellion against silence, a statement that conquest cannot erase humanity itself. The Gestapo, ruthless and efficient, hunts the resistance with relentless fury. Informants whisper names, arrests are made in the dead of night, screams echo from basements where interrogations unfold. Fear becomes a constant companion, for betrayal may come from a neighbor, a colleague, even a friend. Yet the underground adapts, fragments, regroups. Leaders fall, others rise. Networks collapse, new ones form. The very brutality of repression ensures the resistance survives, for each atrocity plants fresh anger, each execution sows seeds of vengeance. Imagine the life of a young woman in occupied Belgium. By day she works in a factory, assembling parts for machines that serve the enemy. By night she rides a bicycle along country roads, carrying messages hidden in loaves of bread, maps tucked into the lining of her coat. She knows that discovery means death, yet she pedals on, her breath misting in the night air, her heart steady. She does not dream of glory, only of endurance, of doing what little she can to remind herself and others that the occupiers have not won entirely. Resistance is not uniform. It is fragmented, divided by ideology, by geography, by desperation. Communists, nationalists, monarchists, Republicans all oppose the occupiers, yet not always in unity. In some regions they fight together, in others they fight each other as bitterly as they fight the Germans. Yet even in division, the common thread remains: the refusal to accept that the Reich is eternal, the refusal to let silence erase the possibility of another future. For the Germans, this underground war becomes a drain, invisible yet constant. Supplies vanish, trains derail, soldiers disappear into forests never to return. Every village may conceal enemies, every face may mask defiance. The more the Reich tries to tighten its grip, the more it bleeds in the shadows. Victories on the map cannot erase the sense of unease, the knowledge that control is never absolute, and yet, for all their courage, the resistance movements cannot by themselves topple the Reich. They can harass, they can wound, they can remind the world that Europe still breathes, but without external support from Britain, from America, from somewhere beyond the continent, their struggle risks becoming a tragic chorus of defiance, extinguished one voice at a time. In our imagined timeline, with Russia gone and Britain endangered, this support is faint, uncertain, perhaps absent altogether. The underground fights on, but with each passing year, hope becomes more fragile, survival more miraculous. Still, history suggests that even the faintest ember can endure, waiting for a gust of wind to ignite it into flame. Each act of sabotage, each whispered poem, each smuggled child is a spark preserved against the darkness. And if the day ever comes when the Reich falters, those sparks may blaze into wildfires, consuming the edifice of tyranny from within. For now, however, resistance is the quiet heartbeat beneath the silence of conquest, a rhythm that persists even when drowned by drums of war. It is the reminder that beneath the swastikas, beneath the propaganda, beneath the daily presence of soldiers, Europe has not surrendered entirely. It waits, hidden, wounded, but alive. And as this fragile underground endures, across the ocean the question returns with urgency. Will America answer its call, or will these voices fade unheard? Across the Atlantic, in Washington, the map upon Roosevelt's wall shows two oceans stretching outward like open hands, one reaching toward Europe, the other toward Asia. Pins and notes cover its surface. Red strings mark convoy routes, blue circles denote bases, black arrows trace the advances of hostile powers. To the president, it is not merely geography, but a portrait of dilemma. On one side lies Britain, battered and besieged, its empire strained, its survival uncertain. On the other lies Japan, restless and ambitious, pressing deeper into China, eyeing the Pacific Islands, casting long shadows toward the Philippines and beyond. America, mighty in potential yet hesitant in action, stands between them, its strength great but not infinite. Which ocean, Roosevelt wonders in his sleepless nights, demands the greater share of vigilance? The American public feels this division acutely. In New York, headlines cry out with news of London's bombardment, of German victories across Europe, of Churchill's desperate appeals. In San Francisco, the newspapers speak with equal urgency of Japanese naval maneuvers, of tensions in the Pacific, of fears that Hawaii or the Philippines might one day fall under attack. Families on the East Coast imagine German submarines prowling near their shores, while those on the West Coast imagine Japanese fleets emerging suddenly over the horizon. The nation is vast, but its fears stretch across every mile, two threats pulling at its heart in opposite directions. In Congress, debates grow heated. Isolationists argue that the oceans still protect America, that it should not squander blood and treasure on wars not its own. Interventionists counter that the oceans are shrinking with every advance of technology, that to wait is to invite disaster. Some insist that Europe is the priority, that if Britain falls, Germany will dominate the continent and perhaps the seas, leaving America isolated in a hostile world. Others insist that the Pacific must come first, that Japan, with its rapid expansion and its hunger for resources, poses the more immediate threat. The chamber echoes with speeches, yet the nation drifts in uncertainty, torn between duty and caution. Roosevelt listens to these arguments, but feels the weight of inevitability. He knows that neutrality cannot last, that the fall of Russia has transformed the war from a European struggle into a global crisis. If Britain collapses, Germany will dominate the Atlantic. If Japan strikes boldly, America's Pacific holdings may crumble. He senses that both fronts must be faced eventually, but to fight both at once will stretch even America's vast resources. And so, he must choose where to strike first, where to commit his people's blood and steel. The military planners present scenarios, each with its risks. A Europe-first strategy demands convoys across an Atlantic infested with U-boats, the rapid buildup of armies trained for amphibious landings, and the hope that Britain can endure long enough to serve as a base. A Pacific-first strategy demands an immense naval war, island by island, across distances unimaginable, against a foe already entrenched. Each plan carries costs, each demands sacrifices, and neither promises quick victory. Roosevelt hears the voices of his generals, his admirals, his advisors, but in the end he knows the decision will be his alone, etched into history by his signature. Imagine an America that turns first to Europe. Factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh roar with production, convoys stream eastward, soldiers train for battles on foreign soil. The people steel themselves for losses in the Atlantic, for the long grind of attrition against Germany. Britain, bloodied but still burning, finds new hope as American divisions arrive, as American planes darken the skies alongside the RAF. The underground resistance, faint and fragile, hears the news and dares to dream again. Yet in this vision, the Pacific trembles. For Japan, seeing America's focus elsewhere, pushes deeper into Asia, perhaps striking boldly at Hawaii or the West Coast itself. Now imagine an America that turns first to the Pacific. Shipyards in California launch carrier after carrier, Marines train for island landings, fleets steam westward into the vastness of the ocean. The Japanese advance is checked, halted, slowly pushed back. Hawaii stands secure, Australia reassured, the Pacific lanes reopened. Yet across the Atlantic, Britain falters, perhaps even falls, its empire dissolving, its people forced into submission. The underground resistance in Europe fights on but grows more desperate, its pleas unanswered. Germany, unchallenged in Europe, fortifies its dominion, perhaps even prepares to meet America across the ocean in some distant, terrible future. In both visions, sacrifice is immense, and in both, America must eventually face both enemies. The question is one of timing, of sequence, of where the first hammer blow falls. Roosevelt senses that whichever path he chooses, history will judge not only the decision itself, but the consequences it sets in motion. To hesitate too long may mean losing both oceans, both wars, both futures. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans live their lives in a twilight of anticipation. A farmer in Iowa tills his fields, listening to radio reports of distant battles. A factory worker in Chicago welds steel for ships, knowing his labor may soon decide the fate of men he will never meet. A student in Boston reads of Churchill's speeches and feels both awe and dread, wondering if his own future lies in uniform on foreign soil. The nation is not yet fully at war, but war's shadow touches every town, every family, every dream. Roosevelt writes his speeches with care, his voice measured, his words chosen to prepare without alarming. He speaks of duty, of vigilance, of America's role in a world where freedom and tyranny wrestle for dominance. He does not yet declare war, but he lays the foundation, brick by careful brick, for the day when he must. In his private moments, he wonders if Britain can endure long enough, if the resistance can survive, if America's people will accept the burden before it is too late. And across the ocean, Hitler watches with suspicion. He knows America's strength, he fears its industry, yet he also trusts in its hesitations, its divisions, its distractions in the Pacific. To him, time is an ally. The longer America debates, the stronger his hold on Europe becomes. He calculates that by the time America acts decisively, the Reich will be unassailable, its empire too vast to challenge. Thus, the world in this imagined year holds its breath. In the forests of Europe, partisans whisper of America like a distant star. In the streets of London, bombed yet unbroken, Churchill prays for its arrival. In Berlin, plans are drawn with confidence that it will remain absent. And in Washington, Roosevelt alone feels the full weight of the question: Europe or the Pacific? Britain or Hawaii? The Atlantic or the endless ocean of islands? The choice looms, immense, inevitable. And while Roosevelt weighs his oceans, across the globe another ally grows restless. Another power prepares to seize its moment. Japan waits, watching, planning. In Berlin and Tokyo, the war rooms glow with the same dim light of maps and calculations, but the visions they hold stretch across opposite horizons. In this imagined world, with Russia broken and Britain threatened, the Axis alliance grows bold, its two pillars dreaming of a globe carved into spheres of domination. Hitler looks west and north, toward the Atlantic, toward Africa, toward a Europe unified under his hand. Japan looks south and east, toward the Pacific, toward the islands and coasts that promise resources, markets, and a pathway to empire. Their visions do not always align, yet together they form a terrifying symmetry, as if the world itself might be split between them like a fruit cut in half. For Germany, the triumphs in Europe and the East have created a momentum that feels unstoppable. With France subdued, Russia conquered, and Britain faltering, Hitler imagines his empire secure, stretching over a continent once thought impossible to hold. His generals begin to think not only of defense but of expansion across the Mediterranean into North Africa, into the Middle East, toward oil fields that promise fuel for 1,000 tanks. They dream of a corridor linking Berlin to Baghdad, of a Europe tied to Asia by steel rails and endless pipelines. The Reich, in their minds, is no longer a European power but a global one, its reach extending far beyond the continent. Japan, meanwhile, senses its own opportunity. With Europe distracted and weakened, with America hesitant, the Pacific seems ripe for conquest. Already entrenched in China, the Japanese Empire casts its gaze toward the Dutch East Indies, toward Malaya, toward the Philippines. The riches of oil, rubber, and tin beckon. Resources that will feed its navy, its factories, its ambition. Tokyo's leaders whisper that this is their moment, that destiny itself has aligned with them, that while Germany remakes Europe, Japan will remake Asia. The alliance between these two powers is less a partnership of equals than a marriage of convenience, bound by shared enemies and a shared belief in destiny. They exchange envoys, sign agreements, coordinate strategies loosely, yet beneath the surface they harbor suspicions of each other. Germany sees Japan as useful in distracting America, in drawing its fleets and factories westward. Japan sees Germany as a hammer that crushes Europe, leaving Asia open to its own dominance. Neither fully trusts the other, yet each calculates that together they form an axis around which the world must revolve. For America, this vision is nightmarish. Imagine a globe where Germany dominates Europe and Africa, Japan controls Asia and the Pacific, and the Atlantic and Pacific both serve as moats defending hostile empires. The Americas would remain free, yet isolated, surrounded by a world where freedom has vanished. The dream of democracy, of self-determination, of open markets and open seas would shrink to a hemisphere under siege. Roosevelt and his advisors see this possibility clearly, though many Americans still do not. It is not merely the fall of Britain or the rise of Japan that threatens, but the combination of both, the unspoken understanding that two dictatorships may divide the world between them, and yet the alliance is not seamless. Germany dreams of global domination, but it looks westward, across the Atlantic toward America itself. Japan dreams of empire in Asia, but it fears that Germany's victories might leave it overshadowed. Their coordination is imperfect, their timelines misaligned. At times they act as though each war is separate, one fought on the plains of Europe, the other across the seas of the Pacific. But history, in this imagined world as in reality, binds them closer than they might wish. America cannot fight one without facing the other, and so the Axis becomes more powerful together than apart. Consider the possibilities that such cooperation might unleash. Imagine a German fleet, bolstered by resources from Russia and the Middle East, pushing into the Indian Ocean, linking with Japanese forces advancing through Southeast Asia. Imagine convoys of German weapons sailing eastward, Japanese oil tankers sailing westward, the two empires meeting somewhere near the gates of India. The map itself becomes a nightmare of connections, an encirclement of the free world that leaves America and whatever remains of Britain as islands in a storm. And yet, for all their triumphs, the Axis powers also face contradictions. Germany rules a continent by force, suppressing peoples who will never accept its dominance. Japan presses deeper into territories where resistance grows fiercer with each passing year. Their victories are vast, but their empires fragile, built upon fear, hunger, and blood. Each new conquest creates new burdens, new resentments, new enemies hidden among the conquered. The alliance, bold in its ambitions, may also carry within it the seeds of overreach. Still, in this imagined year, their confidence is intoxicating. In Berlin, rallies proclaim the dawn of a new order. Crowds cheer as Hitler speaks of destiny fulfilled. In Tokyo, parades honor the soldiers marching southward. Banners wave as the emperor's vision of expansion seems at hand. Propaganda posters in both capitals show a world divided neatly between them, colors spread boldly across maps that hang in schools and offices, teaching children that this is their future. The illusion of inevitability is powerful, and for many it feels as though history itself has already chosen its masters. But history is never so simple. Beneath the parades and the maps, questions remain unanswered. Can Germany and Japan truly coordinate across such vast distances, across cultures so different, across ambitions that may one day collide? Can they hold what they have taken, or will the weight of their conquests drag them down? The alliance, like all alliances, is not unbreakable. It is forged in fire, but fire consumes as well as forges. For now, however, the world trembles before their shadow. In London, Churchill fears not only invasion but encirclement, the thought that Britain may become a lone island surrounded not just by Germany but by an entire global axis. In Washington, Roosevelt sees the future narrowing, the choices dwindling, the urgency rising. And in the colonies of Asia and Africa, ordinary people wonder whether they will exchange one empire for another, whether the defeat of Europe will mean freedom or merely a new kind of bondage. The Axis alliance, then, is both terrifying and unstable, a vision of total domination and a gamble of impossible scope. It holds the promise of dividing the world, but also the peril of collapsing under its own contradictions. The question that hangs over this alternate history is whether it will endure long enough to reshape the globe, or whether its reach will exceed its grasp. And as these questions stir, another front beckons: the deserts of North Africa, the oil-rich lands of the Middle East, where German ambition presses outward, where the empire of sand and sun becomes the next battlefield. The desert stretches like an endless ocean of sand, its dunes shifting with the wind, its horizon shimmering beneath the blaze of the Sunday. In this imagined world, where Germany has conquered the East and secured its hold on Europe, the gaze of its generals now turns southward, across the Mediterranean, toward North Africa and beyond. For in the vastness of the desert lies a corridor to the Middle East, and within the Middle East lies the treasure that fuels modern war: oil. German tanks, their tracks groaning beneath the heat, push forward through Libya and Egypt, their engines churning sand into clouds. The Afrika Korps, hardened by years of battle, advances with renewed vigor, their supply lines now strengthened by resources looted from Russia and Eastern Europe. Alongside them, Italian divisions march once more, eager to reclaim prestige lost in earlier defeats. Together they press toward the Nile, toward the Suez Canal, that narrow artery through which the lifeblood of Britain's empire flows. If the canal falls, the empire itself may fracture, its eastern half cut off from its western heart. For Britain, the desert becomes both shield and grave. Commonwealth troops from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and India dig trenches in the burning sand, their rifles gleaming under the sun, their water rations dwindling with each passing day. The Desert War is unlike any other, not only a clash of armies but a contest against nature itself. Heat sears the skin, dust blinds the eyes, and thirst gnaws more fiercely than bullets. Yet still they fight, each ridge, each oasis, each ruined fort becoming a fortress of resistance. The German advance, however, is relentless. In our true history, the Desert War was balanced on a knife's edge, Rommel's maneuvers brilliant but constrained by logistics. In this imagined path, with Russia subdued and resources flowing freely, those constraints weaken. Supplies arrive in greater volume, fuel no longer scarce, reinforcements drawn from victories in the east. Rommel's dream of sweeping through Egypt, of raising the swastika over Cairo, becomes reality. The pyramids stand silent witness as German banners flutter in the desert wind, and the Suez Canal falls into enemy hands. The consequences ripple outward. Without Suez, Britain's connection to India, Australia, and the Far East falters. Convoys must sail around the Cape of Good Hope, stretching journeys to weeks, exposing them to submarines and storms. The empire's arteries clog, its lifeblood slows, its strength wanes. In London, the loss feels like a wound to the heart, a sign that the empire itself may not survive intact. Churchill rages, yet even his fiery words cannot conceal the despair that grips his cabinet. And beyond Egypt lies the greater prize, the oil of Iraq, of Iran, of the Persian Gulf. German planners, their eyes fixed on maps, see these fields as the key to global supremacy. With oil, the Reich can fuel its tanks, its planes, its ships without end. With oil, its war machine becomes unbreakable, its dominion eternal. German divisions press eastward, crossing deserts once thought impassable, their advance shadowed by the collapse of British defenses. Local populations, long resentful of colonial rule, waver in their loyalties. Some welcome the Germans as liberators from Britain, others fear them as conquerors worse than the last. In the bazaars of Baghdad, whispers mingle with the scent of spice. Has the world itself changed masters? In Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, the shifting front lines bring chaos. Some see opportunity in the weakening of British control, movements for independence stirring in the cracks of empire. Others dread the iron hand of the Reich, its record of cruelty already well known. For Jewish communities, the specter of German occupation brings terror, the knowledge that the machinery of annihilation may soon arrive. Refugees stream southward, desperate to escape the shadow rising from the north. For the German High Command, success in the Middle East promises more than resources. It offers connection. Imagine a map where German forces push through Egypt into the Levant, link hands with Japanese advances pressing westward through Southeast Asia. The dream of an Axis corridor stretching from Berlin to Tokyo, unbroken across deserts, mountains, and seas, comes into view. Supply routes would span continents, armies could reinforce one another, and the free world would find itself encircled as never before. Yet the desert, though conquered on maps, resists in ways more subtle. The farther German forces press, the more fragile their lines become, the more vulnerable to raids by local fighters, to sabotage, to the sheer distance of supply. The sand swallows trucks, the heat warps engines, disease spreads in camps. Victories won on the battlefield are tested by the endurance of men against nature, and even the mightiest machine strains beneath such trials. The desert does not forgive overconfidence. It humbles all who march across it. Still, in this imagined world, the Reich seems unstoppable. Cairo falls, Baghdad trembles, oil flows westward. The dream of a 1,000-year empire stretches beyond Europe into Africa and Asia. Propaganda in Berlin hails the triumph. Films show German soldiers beneath palm trees. Parades celebrate victories that seem to redraw the world. Yet beneath the cheers lies the question unspoken. Can such vast dominion truly endure, or will it crumble under its own weight? For the people who live in these lands, the war is not strategy, but daily life. A Bedouin herder watches tanks crawl across dunes where once only camels passed. A merchant in Cairo sees his stall burned in the chaos of retreat. A mother in Baghdad hears the sound of boots in her street and wonders which empire now rules her children's future. To them, the war is not lines on a map, but the intrusion of power into their homes, their markets, their fields. And for Britain, watching from afar, the loss of the Middle East is more than a military defeat. It is a fracture in identity, a sign that the empire that once claimed the world may not survive its greatest trial. The oil of Persia, the lifeline of India, the link to the Far East all slip away. The empire still exists, but it is an empire bleeding, its strength drained, its unity fragile. In Washington, Roosevelt sees these developments with alarm. If Germany holds the Middle East, if oil flows freely into its grasp, the balance of the war shifts beyond recognition. America's entry may come too late, its strength blunted before it can be wielded. Advisors urge urgency, yet the Pacific still looms. Japan's ambitions still threaten. The dilemma deepens, the oceans grow heavier, the choices narrower. And in Berlin, as generals celebrate victories in desert and oil field, another set of questions arises quietly. Can the Reich, now stretched from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf, sustain itself? Can it feed its armies? Supply its garrisons? Suppress its enemies scattered across so vast a space? Triumph whispers of eternity, but the cracks of overextension already glimmer faintly. Still, for the moment the Reich advances, and the deserts of Africa and the Middle East echo with the roar of engines, the rattle of guns, the cries of conquest. The oil flows, the maps expand, the illusion of permanence deepens, and as the empire stretches ever wider, attention turns not to sand or oil, but to the machinery of its own survival, to the economy that must sustain victory, to the breadbasket of Ukraine, to the steel and coal that fuel its ambition. Factories hum in the heart of Germany, their chimneys painting the sky with smoke, their furnaces glowing like artificial suns in the night. In this imagined world, where Russia lies subdued and the Middle East falls under the swastika, the Reich's economy surges with newfound abundance. Trains arrive daily from Ukraine, their cars heaped with grain. Convoys roll from the Caucasus, carrying oil that glistens black and heavy in barrels. Coal from Silesia, iron from Lorraine, steel from the Ruhr, all converge in a torrent of raw power, feeding assembly lines that clatter with ceaseless rhythm. The war machine, once stretched by scarcity, now swells with confidence, its gears turning smoothly, its output multiplying. The dream of economic invincibility seems fulfilled. German planners speak with pride of an empire that commands not only territory, but the means to sustain it. They envision a Europe bound together by rails and roads, by quotas and production schedules, each conquered land reduced to a cog in the greater mechanism of the Reich. From Paris to Kiev, from Warsaw to Athens, factories are repurposed, workers conscripted, fields reorganized to serve the needs of Berlin. The continent itself becomes an industrial organism, its heartbeat measured in tons of steel, liters of oil, millions of labor hours extracted under the watchful eye of administrators. And yet, beneath this apparent efficiency, lies exploitation of a brutal kind. The resources that flow into Germany do not flow freely. They are wrung from the soil and from the people with ruthless force. In Ukraine, the black earth yields grain, but villages starve as quotas strip away harvests. In the Balkans, mines produce ore, but workers labor under conditions little better than chains, their pay a pittance, their food inadequate, their lives expendable. In the factories of Poland, forced laborers toil endlessly, their bodies weakening, their spirits crushed by the knowledge that they build weapons for the very empire that enslaves them. The economic miracle of the Reich is built not on prosperity but on coercion, not on innovation but on plunder. Consider the breadbasket of Ukraine. Its soil, rich and dark, has fed empires for centuries, its fields stretching unbroken to the horizon. In this alternate timeline, Germany seizes it fully, shipping millions of tons of grain westward each year. For the German people, bread grows abundant, ration lines shorten, confidence in victory deepens. But for the Ukrainians themselves, hunger becomes endemic. Families watch wagons roll past laden with wheat they themselves will never taste. Children collapse in fields, their bodies frail, while German soldiers stand guard to ensure quotas are met. The abundance in Berlin is purchased with famine in Kiev, the illusion of prosperity masking the reality of deprivation. The same is true of oil. In Baku, in Kirkuk, in fields across the Middle East, wells pumped day and night, guarded by German troops, administered by German engineers, tankers and trains carry the lifeblood of war westward, fueling tanks that roll across deserts, planes that roar across skies, ships that patrol the seas. Oil becomes the currency of empire, the measure of its reach, the guarantor of its ambition. Yet each barrel requires protection, each pipeline demands soldiers, each refinery consumes resources to maintain. The greater the flow, the greater the burden of guarding it, the greater the risk of sabotage by those whose lands have been seized. In the Ruhr, in Berlin, in Hamburg, factories transform these resources into weapons. Assembly lines produce panzer tanks in numbers unimagined a few years before. Aircraft roll from hangars with engines fueled by stolen oil. U-boats slide into rivers to hunt across the Atlantic. The Reich becomes an arsenal, its might visible in columns of steel that march endlessly east and west. German citizens, once weary of rationing, now find shelves fuller, their lives more comfortable, their faith in Hitler reinforced by material reward. To many, it seems as though the thousand-year Reich has indeed secured its foundation, yet economies are more fragile than appearances suggest. The greater the empire, the more complex its logistics, the more tangled its networks, the more vulnerable its arteries. Trains stretch for thousands of miles, each link a potential target for partisans. Convoys must cross deserts where sandstorms swallow machines whole. Factories depend upon laborers whose hatred festers quietly, who may sabotage machines, misassemble parts, delay production in ways subtle yet devastating. The illusion of invincibility relies on perfect obedience, and obedience is never perfect when extracted by force. Moreover, the Reich's economy, for all its expansion, is distorted by ideology. Science is harnessed not for discovery but for conformity, innovation stifled by fear of dissent. Engineers who question, economists who doubt, administrators who hesitate, all risk denunciation, exile, or worse. The structure is vast, but it is brittle, its strength enforced by fear rather than sustained by creativity. What seems efficient in the moment may prove unsustainable in the long run, for fear cannot produce resilience and plunder cannot yield loyalty. Still, in this imagined year, the illusion holds. German newspapers boast of record harvests, of industrial triumphs, of an economy that dwarfs anything seen before. Propaganda films show smiling workers, abundant fields, gleaming machines, each image carefully chosen to reinforce the myth of prosperity. Citizens, relieved by fuller shelves and the sight of victories abroad, believe. They believe that the war is won, that the sacrifices of the past have borne fruit, that their children will inherit a world secure and powerful. But the conquered peoples know another story. They know the hunger, the exhaustion, the despair that fuels the Reich's abundance. They know that for every loaf of bread in Berlin, there is a child starving in Warsaw. For every tank rolling from a German factory, there is a prisoner collapsing on the assembly line. For every barrel of oil fueling a plane, there is a village emptied to guard the well. The empire is built not upon prosperity, but upon theft, not upon strength, but upon suffering. Imagine standing in a German factory at midnight, the machines clattering, the air thick with smoke. On one side of the line, German workers in uniforms smile at their abundance, their shifts shorter, their pay higher. On the other side, prisoners labor silently, their eyes hollow, their hands blistered, their strength fading. Both produce the same weapon, but their lives are worlds apart, bound together only by the machine's relentless rhythm. This is the true heartbeat of the Reich's economy. Uneven, exploitative, unsustainable. And so, the illusion of dominance carries within it the seeds of fragility. The greater the wealth extracted, the greater the resentment. The greater the production, the greater the need for resources. The greater the expansion, the greater the strain of holding it all together. The Reich may seem invincible in this moment, but its economy is a tower built on unstable ground, its foundation cracked by contradictions, its height dependent on the silence of millions who may one day rise. For now, however, the empire glitters with the sheen of prosperity. The trains run on time, the factories roar, the shelves fill, the soldiers march with confidence. The illusion is strong enough to intoxicate a people, to persuade them that history has indeed bent to their will. But beneath the roar of machines, faint and distant, another sound persists, the murmuring of rivalries within the Reich itself, the strains of ambition colliding, the rival visions of men whose unity begins to fray. Behind the parades and the triumphant speeches, Behind the banners that proclaim unity and destiny, the Reich seethes with rivalries as sharp and dangerous as knives hidden beneath a cloak. In this imagined world, where Hitler's armies have triumphed from Moscow to Cairo, where the oil flows and the factories thunder, it might seem that the empire stands unassailable. Yet within its heart, the seeds of discord already germinate, watered not by defeat but by victory itself. For in every empire, the greater the triumph, the sharper the struggle for power. Hitler sits at the center like a dark sun, his word law, his whims translated instantly into orders. Around him circle men who owe their careers to his rise. Goering, Himmler, Goebbels, Speer, Bormann, each vying for influence, each guarding his domain jealously. To the outside world they appear united, a machine of perfect discipline, but in private corridors and whispered conversations, their ambitions clash like blades. Goering, bloated with wealth and titles, insists that the Luftwaffe deserves primacy, its victories in the skies proof of his genius. Himmler, with his black-clad SS, builds an empire within the empire, his orders spreading into every conquered land, administering camps, settlements, and colonization with ruthless precision. Goebbels spins illusions, crafting a world where all victories are absolute, where all doubts vanish in the glow of propaganda. Speer, younger and sharper, focuses on industry, seeking efficiency, claiming the mantle of modernity. And Bormann, quiet but relentless, weaves himself ever deeper into Hitler's personal trust, controlling access, shaping decisions in subtle ways. Their rivalries are not merely personal, but structural. The Reich thrives on overlapping authorities, on chaos that forces each man to prove his loyalty by outcompeting the others. Hitler encourages this, believing that constant tension keeps them dependent upon him, ensures that no single subordinate grows too powerful. But in practice, it breeds inefficiency, confusion, and hidden feuds that gnaw at the empire's core. Orders contradict, resources are wasted, projects overlap, and decisions stall as rival factions undermine one another. The empire expands outward with iron certainty, but within it fractures silently. Victory magnifies these tensions. With Russia subdued, who shall administer its vast lands? Goering demands control, citing the Luftwaffe's role in conquest. Himmler insists it belongs to the SS, whose settlers and administrators already march eastward. Civilian bureaucrats claim authority through law, while military governors refuse to yield. Each sees not only power but resources, grain, oil, labor, and each knows that control of the East means influence over the future of the Reich. Their quarrels, often hidden from the public, shape policies that falter in execution, leaving millions trapped between overlapping commands, each harsher than the last. The same struggles emerge in Africa and the Middle East. The Wehrmacht claims the victories of the desert as its domain, but the SS demands footholds, planting its black banners in conquered cities, asserting that its ideological purity gives it the right to rule. German industry eyes the oil fields hungrily, lobbying Speer for contracts, while Goering insists that the four-year plan should remain supreme. Hitler listens, encourages, divides, never resolving fully, always keeping each faction tethered to his approval. To outsiders it appears mastery, to insiders it feels like quicksand. Even within the army, unity begins to fray. Victories bring glory, but they also breed resentment between generals, each eager for credit, each maneuvering to secure his legacy. Rommel, triumphant in the desert, gains admiration that overshadows rivals, yet his independence sparks jealousy. Eastern Front commanders, flush with conquest, claim superiority, dismissing Rommel as a mere tactician of sand. The older Prussian elite resent the new men elevated by Hitler, while the newer commanders despise the conservatism of their elders. The army, once the proud heart of German power, becomes another arena of rivalry, its cohesion strained even amid triumph. And then there is Hitler himself. Victories inflate his sense of destiny, his belief that his intuition surpasses reason, that his will alone bends history. He dismisses caution, overrides experts, pursues visions grander and riskier than even his generals dare imagine. The greater his triumphs, the more absolute his conviction becomes, and the more his subordinates must adapt to whims that grow increasingly detached from practicality. In this imagined world, Hitler is not humbled by setbacks as in our true history. Instead, he is intoxicated by success, convinced that nothing can oppose him. Such certainty can inspire, but it can also doom, for unchecked ambition often overreaches, dragging empires into peril they cannot see until it is too late. Yet for the ordinary German citizen, these rivalries remain hidden, masked by pageantry and propaganda. They see only victories, hear only speeches of unity, feel only the material comforts delivered by conquest. Newspapers proclaim record harvests. Newsreels show generals shaking hands, rallies roar with chants of loyalty. Few suspect that beneath the facade, the empire already strains against itself, that rivalries gnaw at its foundations, but those caught within the Reich's grasp feel the consequences directly. In occupied territories, contradictory orders breed chaos. One day a village is taxed by the Wehrmacht, the next it is cleared by the SS, the next, its labor conscripted by civilian officials. Families live under overlapping authorities, never sure whose rules will dominate, always certain that punishment awaits if they fail to comply. For them, the rivalries of men in Berlin translate into daily instability, into suffering without logic, into oppression layered upon oppression. Imagine a settler colony in Ukraine, where German administrators build new farms upon seized land. The SS enforces ideological purity, expelling local families and importing German settlers. Meanwhile, Göring's agents demand quotas of grain for the Luftwaffe. Civilian officials impose taxes, and the Wehrmacht requisitions supplies for nearby garrisons. The settlers themselves, promised prosperity, find themselves caught in bureaucratic confusion, unsure whose orders to follow, frustrated by inefficiency. What was meant to be a showcase of order becomes a tangle of competing demands, revealing the fragility hidden beneath the image of strength. The rivalries also reveal something deeper, the empire's lack of a coherent future. Hitler speaks of 1,000 years, of permanence, but his subordinates envision different paths. Göring imagines a Europe of wealth and abundance, centered on his economic empire. Himmler dreams of a racial utopia built on colonization and extermination. Speer speaks of modern industry, of efficiency, of rational planning. Goebbels insists on endless propaganda, a world shaped by illusion as much as by fact. None agree fully, and none dare oppose Hitler openly. Their visions overlap, contradict, and collide, producing a future that is never fully defined, always improvised, always unstable. Thus, even in victory, the Reich trembles with uncertainty. Its outward expansion conceals inward fissures. Its triumphs mask its fragility. History teaches that empires often collapse, not from enemies without, but from rivalries within, from the inability to reconcile ambition with reality. In this alternate world, where Germany seems invincible, perhaps these rivalries remain hidden for years, perhaps they fester quietly until a crisis exposes them, but they are there, seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow into fractures, fractures that may one day shatter the illusion of permanence. For now, however, the empire parades, its leaders smiling beside one another, their rivalries disguised as unity. The crowds cheer, the banners wave, the illusion holds. But beneath the roar of triumph lies another sound, the murmur of the people themselves, those who live beneath occupation, whose daily lives are shaped not by rivalries of elites, but by the struggle to endure under domination. Beneath the banners, beneath the speeches, beneath the endless parades of marching boots lies the world of ordinary lives, quieter but no less profound. In this imagined Europe, conquered and reordered by the Reich, daily existence becomes a test of endurance, of navigating rules imposed from above, of keeping one's spirit alive in a world that demands obedience. The grand visions of leaders and generals translate into the smallest details of life. What one can eat, what one can say, what one can teach to one's children. A family in Paris wakes to the sound of German patrols passing their street, the scrape of boots against cobblestones like an unwelcome metronome. The baker's shelves, once filled with croissants and loaves of fresh bread, now display meager offerings, much of the flour requisitioned for German soldiers. The father waits in line for hours, ration card in hand, hoping to secure enough food for his children. The mother whispers to her daughter not to ask questions too loudly, not to repeat at school the words she hears at home. The daughter nods, though she does not yet fully understand why speaking truth could be dangerous. In Warsaw, life is harsher still. Families live crowded within the walls of the ghetto, hunger constant, disease ever present. Outside, the rest of the city also suffers under occupation, curfews enforced, fear omnipresent. A teacher once devoted to poetry now works in secret, gathering children in a cramped apartment, teaching them lines forbidden by the occupiers. He knows that discovery means death, but he also knows that without memory, a people disappears. Each poem recited in whispers becomes a weapon against silence, each lesson a refusal to vanish. In the countryside of Ukraine, peasants till fields whose harvests are loaded directly onto German trains. They keep hidden patches of potatoes, buried caches of grain, small acts of resistance against starvation. At night, families gather in candlelight, telling stories of ancestors who endured past invasions, past empires, reminding themselves that survival is possible, that conquest is never eternal. The old sing-songs quietly, the children listen wide-eyed, and in these fragile rituals the thread of identity persists, even as the occupiers demand its erasure. For many, survival means compromise. A shopkeeper in Amsterdam sells to German soldiers because refusal would bring ruin. A policeman in Prague enforces curfews, torn between duty to his neighbors and fear of retribution. A musician in Vienna plays German marches at official events, though in his heart he longs to play Beethoven as he remembers it, not as the Reich demands. These compromises weigh heavily, each choice a negotiation between conscience and survival, each decision leaving scars invisible but deep. Yet within this web of compromises, small acts of defiance endure. A farmer slips an extra loaf of bread into the hands of a partisan passing through. A woman in Brussels hides a radio beneath her floorboards, tuning in each night to forbidden broadcasts from London, her heart racing with every crackle of static. A boy in Athens scrawls graffiti on a wall, a simple word, freedom erased by mourning but remembered by those who saw it. These acts may seem small, but they carry immense weight, for they remind the oppressed that they are not alone, that the conqueror's grip is not total. The occupiers, for their part, attempt to shape daily life with propaganda. Posters show smiling families beneath the swastika, promising prosperity and order. Newspapers print only approved stories, emphasizing German victories, silencing dissent. Films screened in occupied cinemas portray the Reich as benevolent, its soldiers as protectors. Yet the people see the gap between propaganda and reality. They watch trains filled with prisoners, they hear whispers of atrocities, they feel hunger gnawing their stomachs. No poster can erase the truth of their own experience. No speech can mask the empty shelves or the fear of a midnight knock at the door. Children grow up in this distorted world, their schooling reshaped by occupiers. In classrooms, maps are redrawn, languages suppressed, lessons rewritten to glorify the Reich. Teachers who resist are dismissed, or worse, replaced by those who obey. Yet even here, resistance persists quietly. A grandmother teaches her grandson lullabies in their native tongue, forbidden but remembered. A parent keeps a hidden book, its pages worn thin, read only by candlelight. These small acts preserve identity, carrying it like embers through a dark winter, waiting for the day when it can blaze again. For some, collaboration becomes a path chosen willingly, Opportunists thrive under occupation, gaining wealth and power by serving the occupiers. They run businesses, supplying German needs, inform on their neighbors, join auxiliary forces. Their lives may seem comfortable, yet they too live with shadows, for collaboration is a gamble profitable in the present, but dangerous should the tide ever turn. History, even in this alternate world, whispers that tides always turn. Meanwhile, in Berlin, ordinary Germans live differently. Their shelves are fuller, their homes warmer, their lives improved by the flow of resources from conquered lands. To them, the war feels distant, its costs borne by others. They attend rallies, cheer parades, believe the promises of permanence. Yet even here, whispers of unease circulate. Letters from the front speak of brutality, of endless patrols, of partisans that never disappear. Soldiers on leave carry with them shadows they cannot shake, stories they dare not tell openly. Beneath the surface of triumph lies unease, though most silence it, choosing comfort over truth. Daily life then becomes a mirror of empire, fragile, compromised, filled with both submission and defiance. The occupiers impose their order, but order is never total. Beneath it lies the stubborn resilience of human spirit, the refusal to let identity vanish, the quiet hope that one day the conquerors will falter. In every whispered song, in every hidden book, in every loaf of bread given in secret, lies the seed of resistance, small yet enduring. Imagine walking through a city under occupation at dusk. The streets are quiet, the lamps dimmed. German soldiers march in formation. Windows are shuttered, doors closed, silence heavy. Yet behind those doors, families speak softly, share stories, cling to fragments of normal life. In one home, a mother hums a lullaby to her child. In another, a father sharpens a tool that will become a weapon. In another, a teenager writes a poem by candlelight, words of defiance that may never be read. The city appears subdued, but beneath its surface, it breathes with quiet resistance. This daily endurance, this survival in silence, is as important as battles won or lost. It ensures that when empires fall, as they always do, the people remain, their culture, their memory, their identity preserved. In this alternate history, the Reich may seem unshakable, but its subjects already weave the fabric of its undoing, thread by thread, day by day. And beyond these quiet homes and hidden songs, another shadow gathers not of resistance alone, but of science and war, of weapons that could end empires in fire. Across the ocean, in laboratories far from battlefields, new forces stir, forces that may one day reach Berlin itself. Far from the occupied cities of Europe, across an ocean that still feels vast, though increasingly fragile, another story unfolds in secrecy. In the deserts of New Mexico, in hidden laboratories in Chicago, in quiet corners of universities where chalk dust lingers on blackboards, scientists labor under a cloak of silence. They are part of a project whose name is never spoken aloud in full, a project that draws the brightest minds together, a project that promises to unleash a force unlike anything the world has ever seen. In this alternate history, where Britain falters and Germany dominates, the urgency of their work grows heavier, the question sharper. Who will receive the first flash of this new sun? America, hesitant to commit fully to the war in Europe, still pours resources into research. Roosevelt understands that science may become the deciding battlefield, that laboratories may shape the future as much as armies. The Manhattan Project, cloaked in secrecy, expands even as the public debates isolation and intervention. Scientists whisper in corridors of uranium and plutonium, of chain reactions and critical masses, of equations that describe not life, but destruction. Each breakthrough brings them closer to a weapon that could alter not just the war, but the very nature of history. In our true timeline, the atomic bomb fell upon Japan. But in this imagined world, where Germany has triumphed across Europe and Russia has collapsed, another target looms larger. Berlin, the heart of the Reich, the city from which orders radiate across continents, becomes the unspoken destination. The thought chills even those who work on the project, for they know that the weapon they forge is not merely destructive, but apocalyptic. To imagine it falling upon a European capital, upon a city alive with millions, is to imagine fire consuming the very heart of civilization. Yet necessity, in war, reshapes morality. If the Reich cannot be defeated by tanks and planes, perhaps it can be broken by the birth of a new sun above its own skies. Consider the possibility. The year is 1946. German troops occupy Britain. The Reich's empire stretches from the Atlantic to the Middle East. America has fought only skirmishes, waiting, preparing, and then, one August morning, the skies above Berlin crack open with a light brighter than day. A mushroom cloud rises over the city, its stem billowing, its crown unfurling into the heavens. Buildings vanish in an instant. Streets melt into rivers of fire. Lives extinguish in a silence too vast to comprehend. The Reich, which promised 1,000 years, sees its heart reduced to ash in a single afternoon. The consequences ripple outward. In Europe, collaborators stare in horror, resistance members feel both triumph and dread, civilians grieve amid ruins. In America, headlines scream victory, but whispers grow uneasy. What has been unleashed cannot be undone. In Tokyo, Japan calculates swiftly, realizing that if Berlin can burn, so too can its cities. The world, reshaped by conquest, is reshaped again by science. The balance of power turned not by armies, but by physics. And yet, history is never so straightforward. What if the bomb comes later, when Germany has fortified itself further, when its leaders scatter, when the Reich already spans too far to collapse from a single blow? A bomb on Berlin might kill millions, but would it end the empire or simply harden its resolve? Might Hitler, intoxicated by his own vision, vow vengeance with even greater fury, demanding retaliation, driving his scientists to pursue weapons of their own? For in this alternate world, where Germany commands vast resources, the possibility of a German atomic project looms larger. What if they too reach for the atom? Their laboratories hidden deep in the forests of Silesia, their experiments advancing under the guidance of brilliant minds coerced into service. The race could become not one-sided, but deadly symmetrical, a contest to see who first unleashes the apocalypse. Even without Germany's own bomb, the ethical burden of America's choice weighs heavily. Scientists in Los Alamos argue quietly among themselves. Some insist the weapon is necessary, that without it the Reich will never fall. Others shudder, asking whether victory purchased with such horror can be called victory at all. Oppenheimer, staring at calculations, recalls words of ancient scripture. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." In this alternate path, those words may echo not over the ruins of Hiroshima, but over the ruins of Berlin, resonating through the heart of Europe. The civilians of occupied lands dream of liberation, yet they too fear what liberation might mean. A French mother hiding her children in a cellar wonders whether the Allies will save them or destroy them in the process. A Polish partisan hears rumors of a weapon that can level a city and wonders whether his own village will one day vanish beneath its fire. Liberation promised by such a weapon carries with it a shadow, for it saves by annihilating, it ends tyranny by ending life indiscriminately. And then there is the question of after. Suppose Berlin burns, the Reich collapses, Hitler perishes in a blaze of fire. What rises in the ruins? Does America become the sole arbiter of the post-war world, its atomic monopoly shaping a new order? Does fear of the weapon silence dissent, impose a peace born not of trust but of terror? Or does the use of the bomb ignite a new race, as other powers scramble to master the same force, ensuring that the future becomes not peace but perpetual threat? The bomb promises not only victory but transformation, and transformations are rarely simple. Imagine, too, the psychological blow. A Reich that prided itself on permanence, on destiny, sees its capital erased in seconds. The illusion of invincibility shatters. Collaborators lose faith, occupied peoples rise, German soldiers desert, wondering what empire can survive a sun falling from the sky. The power of the bomb lies not only in destruction, but in fear, in the knowledge that no city, no fortress, no empire can stand against it. And yet fear is a double-edged blade. It may topple tyrants, but it may also scar humanity forever, teaching that survival depends on holding the ability to end everything. Thus, America's delayed entry becomes a paradox. By waiting, by hesitating, by letting Germany expand unchecked, it may unleash a future where victory comes not through sacrifice on battlefields, but through a single moment of unimaginable fire. A victory swifter, perhaps, but darker, leaving behind not triumph, but questions that echo into eternity. And across the ashes of Berlin, across the ruins of empire, a new question rises. If Germany falls not by defeat in arms, but by annihilation from the sky, what kind of world emerges? A world grateful for survival, or a world haunted by the knowledge that its future lies under the shadow of the atom? The mushroom cloud over Berlin has faded, its ash settling slowly across the ruins of a city that once declared itself eternal. Yet the world it leaves behind is not one of clarity, but of haunting ambiguity. The Reich may collapse in that instant, its leaders dead, its armies stunned, its subjects shaken free of fear, but what rises from the rubble is less certain. Victory purchased in fire leaves scars not only on the land but on the imagination of all who survive. In Europe, the reaction is uneven. In Paris, in Warsaw, in Prague, church bells toll not for mourning alone but for liberation, their chimes echoing through streets where German patrols vanish overnight. Collaborators flee, resistance fighters emerge openly, people flood into public squares to tear down swastikas and raise flags hidden for years in attics and cellars. Yet amid the jubilation lies dread, for the weapon that freed them has also terrified them. If Berlin can be erased in an instant, what of Paris? What of Warsaw? What of Prague itself? Should America choose differently tomorrow? The shadow of the atom falls not only on the defeated but on the liberated, the remnants of the Reich splinter. In some regions, German generals, cut off and leaderless, attempt to hold territories, insisting the war is not lost. In others, SS officers flee into forests, vowing vengeance, whispering of a future reborn in secrecy. But most soldiers, stunned by the annihilation of their capital, lay down their arms, convinced that no human effort can prevail against such power. The 1,000-year Reich crumbles, not with gradual decay, but with a sudden collapse, its ideology exposed as mortal, its myth reduced to ash. Yet the collapse of tyranny does not bring simple peace. Across the continent, a vacuum emerges. Who will govern the liberated lands? France reclaims its institutions, but weakened, scarred, divided between resistance and collaboration. Poland emerges shattered, its cities in ruins, its people decimated. The Balkans seethe with rivalries, ethnic and political, suppressed by German rule but never extinguished. Without careful guidance, liberation risks becoming chaos, freedom dissolving into conflict. And in this imagined world, with Britain fallen or diminished and Russia erased, there is no natural European counterweight, no clear ally to America in rebuilding order. America then stands alone, triumphant yet isolated, holding the most fearsome weapon ever created. Roosevelt, or perhaps his successor, realizes that the world now looks to Washington not only as savior, but as potential master. The bomb has given America unmatched power, but with it comes suspicion, fear, and responsibility of a kind no nation has ever borne. Can America resist the temptation to shape the world in its own image, or will it wield the atom as an instrument of dominance? Will the liberated peoples of Europe see America as a beacon or as a new empire, cloaked not in colonies but in technology? Japan, meanwhile, watches intently from across the Pacific. Its empire remains intact, its armies still entrenched in China, its fleet still patrolling seas. The destruction of Berlin is both warning and opportunity. Japanese leaders understand that if America possesses such power, their own survival is at risk. Yet they also sense that with Germany gone, they stand as the last great Axis power, inheritors of a divided world. Asia, already under their control, might now be theirs uncontested if America hesitates to extend its reach beyond Europe. Tokyo calculates, wondering whether to seek terms, to consolidate gains, or to press forward before the bomb can be turned against them. For the peoples of Asia, this uncertainty deepens suffering. In China, where resistance to Japan continues, the fall of Germany offers little relief. The war grinds on, villages burned, civilians starved, lives consumed. In Southeast Asia, colonized first by Europe and then by Japan, the question becomes whether America will intervene to restore old empires or allow new nations to rise. The bomb that ended Berlin does not end their struggles, it merely shifts their context. Thus, the post-war order in this imagined world diverges profoundly from our own. In reality, two giants emerge from the ruins: America and the Soviet Union, their rivalry shaping decades. But in this alternate path, with the Soviets erased, the balance collapses. America holds the bomb alone, its power unchallenged, its influence extending across oceans. Europe, shattered and leaderless, becomes dependent, its survival tied to American aid and protection. Asia, dominated by Japan, remains contested, its future uncertain. The world is no longer bipolar, but imbalanced, a single power overshadowing all others, its dominance both stabilizing and suffocating. And yet, history suggests that such imbalance cannot last. Other nations will seek the secret of the atom, their scientists racing to replicate what America has achieved. Germany's fall may slow this process, but it cannot prevent it. Britain, if it survives, even in diminished form, will seek the bomb. Japan, fearing annihilation, will race for it. Perhaps even smaller nations, fearful of American dominance, will begin their own secret experiments. The atom, once unleashed, cannot be contained. Its presence reshapes not only war, but politics, trust, and the very concept of sovereignty. Imagine Europe in 1950 under this alternate path. Berlin lies in ruins, its survivors haunted by shadows on walls where people once stood. Paris rebuilds slowly, its boulevards alive again, but cautious, always glancing westward to Washington for guidance. Warsaw mourns, its population halved, its churches filled with candles for the dead. Across the continent, nations rebuild, but none with true independence, for each knows that ultimate power lies not in their armies or economies, but in the distant laboratories of America. A silent empire of influence emerges, unacknowledged but inescapable, its foundations not colonies but fear. And in America itself, triumph carries unease. Citizens celebrate victory, yet some whisper of guilt, of the moral cost of annihilating a city. Scientists who built the bomb write letters urging restraint, warning that what has been done once can be done again, perhaps many times. Politicians debate whether to reveal the weapon's existence openly or to shroud it further in secrecy. The public lives in a paradox of pride and dread, proud that their nation holds such power, fearful of what it might mean for the future. Thus the world after Berlin is both safer and more dangerous. The Reich is gone, its terror ended, but in its place rises a new terror, the knowledge that civilization itself can be ended in an instant. The dream of peace is haunted by the specter of fire, the promise of freedom overshadowed by the possibility of annihilation. The post-war order is fragile, brittle, defined less by hope than by fear, less by alliances than by dependence, and beyond this fragile balance lies a deeper question whispered in universities, in churches, in homes across the globe. If science can unmake cities, can it also unmake humanity? What kind of culture, what kind of art, what kind of future can flourish under the shadow of the atom? When the guns fall silent, When banners are lowered and parades disperse, what remains of a civilization is not only its armies, but its soul. In this imagined world, where Germany has conquered Europe and America has unleashed the atom upon Berlin, the question shifts from territory to meaning. What becomes of art under tyranny? What becomes of philosophy when fear shadows every thought? What becomes of humanity itself when survival is no longer shaped by courage alone, but by the presence of a weapon that can erase cities in the blink of an eye? In the lands once ruled by the Reich, the cultural scars are deep. Libraries stripped of forbidden books leave shelves filled only with propaganda, their silences louder than words. Music halls, once vibrant with symphonies, echo with marches, their audiences trained to clap on cue, their applause hollow. Painters either conform to the stiff lines of state-approved art or vanish into obscurity, their canvases hidden in attics, their visions unshared. Philosophy bends beneath ideology, scholars forced to twist truth into loyalty. For years, creativity itself becomes an act of resistance, survival measured not only in bread but in the courage to remember. After the fall, the cultural landscape is fractured. Some reclaim what was suppressed, forbidden poems emerge from memory, hidden manuscripts are published at last, canvases long concealed are revealed with trembling hands, yet others cannot return. The silence of those who perished remains unfillable, entire generations of voices lost. Europe, liberated yet hollowed, struggles to sing again with its former richness, each note haunted by the memory of those silenced. Even as art revives, it carries within it the shadow of what was destroyed, a reminder that culture, too, can be wounded beyond repair. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America emerges not only as the military victor, but as the cultural center of gravity. Its movies, its music, its literature spread across a shattered Europe, filling the vacuum left by war. Jazz echoes in Parisian cafes once more, Hollywood films flicker on screens in Warsaw, American novels circulate in London and Rome. To some, this influx feels liberating, a fresh breeze after years of suffocation. To others, it feels like replacement, as though Europe, weakened, cannot recover its own voice and must now borrow another's. The balance of culture shifts, just as the balance of power has, leaving questions of identity unsettled. Science, too, bears scars. In Germany, where research was once twisted by ideology, the ruins of laboratories testify to brilliance squandered, to minds forced into servitude, to discoveries abandoned. In America, science surges forward, buoyed by the triumph of the bomb but shadowed by its consequences. Laboratories expand, universities thrive, but every equation carries the echo of destruction. Scientists debate their own responsibility. Are they servants of power or guardians of humanity? Can knowledge be pursued without fear of its misuse, or has the atom forever bound discovery to destruction? These questions, once abstract, now shape policy, ethics, even faith. For ordinary people, culture is lived less in philosophy than in daily rituals. A family in liberated France gathers to hear music on the radio, their tears falling as they recognize a song once banned. A teacher in Poland writes a lesson on history, determined that children will know not only the victors but the victims, not only the conquerors but the conquered. A poet in Germany, ashamed of his silence during the Reich, writes verses of apology, uncertain whether words can ever heal what was done. Across the continent, art becomes both balm and mirror, soothing wounds while reflecting horrors too vast to comprehend. In Japan, entrenched in Asia, culture takes another path. Propaganda continues, discipline hardens, yet even there, whispers of the atom reach ears. Artists sketch shadows of cities erased, musicians write laments disguised as patriotic songs, philosophers debate quietly whether their own empire may one day face the same fate as Germany. The presence of the bomb changes not only politics, but thought itself, a specter hovering above every act of creation, a reminder that beauty and meaning exist always in the shadow of annihilation. And so a paradox emerges. Never before has humanity possessed such power to destroy, yet never before has the impulse to create, to endure, to express been so urgent. Art becomes more than entertainment, it becomes defiance. A declaration that even in the face of fire, the human spirit will not vanish. A painting of a mother holding her child, a song sung in a ruined square, a story whispered by candlelight, these become as important as treaties and armies, for they remind survivors that humanity is not only destruction, but memory, tenderness, imagination. Philosophy, too, shifts. Thinkers ask whether progress is still progress if it ends in fire. They debate whether freedom can survive when survival itself depends upon weapons too terrible to use, yet too dangerous to ignore. Some argue that humanity has entered a new age, where morality must be redefined not around nations, but around survival of the species itself. Others despair, believing that culture may never escape the shadow of the atom, that all art and thought from this moment onward will carry within it the fear of sudden annihilation. Yet history, even in this alternate path, suggests resilience. The Renaissance followed plague. The Enlightenment followed wars of religion. Romanticism followed revolution. Perhaps a new flowering of art, a new philosophy of responsibility, may emerge from the ruins of Berlin, from the silence of Hiroshima unbombed but remembered, from the ashes of cities occupied and freed. Perhaps the atom, terrible though it is, may force humanity to imagine itself as one, to see beyond nations and empires, to seek meaning in common survival. Or perhaps the opposite, a descent into paranoia, each nation racing to build its own bomb, culture suffocated by fear, art bent to the service of propaganda, philosophy reduced to rationalizations for destruction. Imagine walking through a gallery in Paris 10 years after Berlin's fall. The walls display paintings in two starkly different styles. One, mournful landscapes of ruins, shadows stretching across empty streets. The other, bright abstractions bursting with color, defiant in their refusal to depict destruction. Visitors move slowly, some weeping, some silent, some smiling faintly as though reminded that beauty can return. In the same city, a philosopher lectures in a crowded hall, arguing that culture itself must be reimagined, that art and science can no longer serve empires, but must serve humanity as a whole. His students take notes, not because they believe fully, but because they hope. Thus, the cultural order of this alternate world is neither wholly despair nor wholly rebirth. It is both entwined, inseparable, the memory of conquest and annihilation weighing heavily, yet the impulse to sing, to paint, to write, refusing to vanish. Humanity, scarred, limps forward, carrying its wounds openly, its hope uncertain but alive. And as culture reawakens, as philosophy gropes for meaning, another question rises quietly in the background, not of armies or bombs, but of time itself. For history spirals always forward, and the children born into this new world will inherit not memories but stories. What kind of stories will they be told? Stories of tyranny defeated, of cities burned, of survival against all odds? Or stories of fear, of silence, of a future forever shadowed by the atom? Children are always the quiet witnesses of history, their eyes wide as the world reshapes around them, their futures molded by decisions they did not make. In this imagined world, where the Reich has ruled, where Berlin has burned beneath an atomic sun, where America alone carries the secret of annihilation, the next generation grows up in landscapes scarred by both conquest and liberation. Their childhoods are shaped not by innocence but by memory, by whispers, by shadows that linger long after parades end and banners fall. In the ruins of Berlin, children play among shattered stones, their laughter echoing strangely against walls half collapsed. They build castles from rubble, pretending to defend them against invisible enemies, their games shaped by the only world they have known. Some are orphans, their parents vanished in fire or in prisons, their guardians the streets themselves. Relief workers bring food, teach them to write, yet their drawings reveal what words cannot. Mushrooms of smoke rising above cities, soldiers with dark helmets, skies filled with planes. For them, childhood is inseparable from catastrophe, imagination entwined with fear. In Paris, children sit once more in classrooms, but their lessons are fragmented. Teachers struggle to explain what has happened, torn between honesty and protection. They speak of tyranny defeated, of freedom restored, yet they avoid details that might overwhelm young minds. Still, the children know more than adults think. They have seen soldiers in the streets, heard arguments whispered at night, watched neighbors disappear, and return never again. Their notebooks fill with questions their teachers cannot answer. Why do people obey? Why do bombs fall? Why do cities vanish? The generation that grows here is one of restless minds, skeptical of simple truths, haunted by contradictions. In Warsaw, education resumes in classrooms patched together from ruins. Children sit on benches made from planks, writing with pencils worn to stubs. Their teachers, survivors themselves, insist on teaching history, not the falsified stories once forced upon them, but the truth, as much as it can be spoken. Lessons are not only about kings and battles, but about ghettos, about hunger, about courage and despair. For these children, memory is not abstract, but immediate, their family stories woven into their identity. They grow up faster, their games tinged with tragedy, their laughter edged with solemnity. In villages of Ukraine, children work alongside parents in fields, their hands rough with labor, their shoulders burdened early. They remember soldiers taking grain, remember nights of hunger, remember whispers of resistance. Their songs are old folk tunes, but now sung with new meanings, carrying defiance hidden within melody. They grow up knowing that survival depends upon silence and cleverness, upon the ability to hide as much as to speak. Their future feels uncertain, their dreams modest. A full meal, a safe home, a life without fear. In America, children live differently. They play in backyards, their shelves filled with books, their bellies full. Yet even there, the war has left its mark. Newspapers speak of atomic fire, newsreels show mushroom clouds, schools conduct drills where children hide beneath desks, their small bodies curled against invisible destruction. Their teachers tell them they are fortunate to be American, fortunate to live under a flag that holds the atom as a shield. But at night, some whisper their fears. What if another nation builds the same weapon? What if one day the sky above New York or Chicago burns as Berlin did? Their childhood is safe yet anxious, filled with both pride and dread, shaped by knowledge too heavy for their years. In Japan, children learn another set of lessons. Their schools teach loyalty to the emperor, discipline, sacrifice. Yet whispers reach them too. Stories of Berlin's destruction, of an American weapon beyond imagination. Teachers reassure them that Japan will endure, but the children sense unease in their elders' voices, see shadows in their parents' eyes. They grow up under banners of empire, but also under the fear that their own cities may share Berlin's fate. Their childhood is disciplined, constrained, heavy with duties, yet threaded with quiet anxieties they cannot name. Across all these lands, the stories told to children diverge, yet all are marked by war and its aftermath. In Germany, parents struggle with shame, how to explain what was done in their name, how to reconcile pride with guilt, how to raise children in ruins. Some tell half-truths, others remain silent, leaving children to piece together fragments. In occupied lands, parents emphasize resilience, telling stories of survival, of endurance, of small victories hidden amid despair. In America, parents tell stories of triumph, of science and courage, yet their tone carries unease, as though victory itself has become too heavy. Art for children changes as well. In France, picture books once filled with fairy tales now carry allegories of resistance. Wolves defeated not by hunters, but by small birds, refusing to sing the enemy's song. In Poland, Folk tales are retold with darker edges, giants standing in for oppressors, villages surviving through cleverness and solidarity. In America, comic books depict superheroes defeating tyrants with impossible powers, yet shadows creep into the panels, villains wielding weapons that resemble bombs. Even in play, the shadow of history falls across their imaginations, shaping how they see the world and themselves. This generation, growing beneath both tyranny and Adam, may become one unlike any before. They inherit not only ruins but questions, not only survival but responsibility. Will they grow cautious, fearful, defined by trauma? Or will they grow bold, determined to build a world where such horrors never return? Their education, their games, their stories suggest both possibilities. Some may turn inward, seeking safety in silence. Others may turn outward, seeking justice, renewal, peace. History spirals, and in its spiral, children are both the echoes of the past and the seeds of the future. Imagine a classroom in 1955, a decade after Berlin's fall. The teacher asks her students to draw what they think the future will look like. One child sketches rockets flying to the moon, cities gleaming with light. Another draws fields full of wheat, families gathered around tables with food. A third draws a mushroom cloud, vast and terrible, dominating the page. Each drawing reveals a vision, each vision a path humanity might take. The children of this alternate world carry all possibilities within them. Creation, destruction, endurance, hope, and as they grow, they will inherit not only their parents' memories, but the world's silence. For the deepest question of all may not be what they remember, but what they are told, and what is left unsaid. Memory can guide, but it can also fade. If the horrors of tyranny and the fire of the atom are remembered fully, perhaps they will inspire vigilance, caution, compassion. If they are softened, hidden, forgotten, perhaps history will spiral back again, repeating what was thought impossible. The next generation stands at the edge of both paths, their small hands holding the weight of futures yet unwritten. And as they step forward carrying stories and silences alike, the spiral itself nears its close. For beyond children, beyond memory, beyond politics lies the final layer. Humanity as a whole, the global perspective, the question not of nations but of existence itself. It began with the rumble of engines over the channel, with barges pressed into waves, with Britain's lantern flickering in the storm of invasion. That was the moment we imagined first, the turning point where history might have bent. Now, after wandering through deserts and forests, through laboratories and classrooms, through the ruins of empires and the whispers of children, we return to that shore not as it was, but as it might have been seen from the farthest horizon. For the question was never only about Britain, or Germany, or even Europe. It was always about humanity itself, about what path it might walk if tyranny triumphed and fire was called down from the sky. From the beaches of Kent to the wheat fields of Ukraine, from the alleys of Warsaw to the deserts of Cairo, the Reich stretched outward, its banners rising, its soldiers marching, its victims silenced. The 1,000-year empire appeared unbreakable, its economy swollen by plunder, its armies sharpened by victory, its leaders intoxicated by power. Yet even in triumph, it carried within itself fissures, rivalries among its rulers, resentment among its subjects, burdens too vast to bear. No empire can expand without limit. No order can erase all resistance. No illusion can mask fragility forever. Then came the atom, a sun born on earth, a fire neither ancient myth nor divine judgment, but human-made, calculated in equations, built in silence, unleashed in a single moment. Berlin, the heart of conquest, reduced to shadows on walls, its triumphal arches collapsed into ash. The Reich ended not by exhaustion in trenches, not by uprising in cities, but by annihilation from above, a warning as much as a victory. Humanity stepped into a new age, one where destruction was no longer the privilege of time, but the decision of a moment. And so the world that followed was not one of simple liberation, but of paradox. Europe freed, yet fearful. America triumphant, yet burdened. Japan entrenched, yet haunted. Children raised beneath stories of both survival and fire, their imaginations shaped by contradictions too heavy for their small shoulders. Culture revived but scarred, art flowering in shadows, philosophy searching for meaning in a world where history itself seemed fragile. Humanity had endured tyranny, but in doing so had unleashed a force that threatened to unmake it entirely. What if this had been our path? What if Britain had fallen, Russia erased, Germany triumphant, and America's answer delivered in fire over Europe? Would our world today still be divided, still be haunted by arsenals of unimaginable power, still be marked by silences too deep for words? Or would it have burned entirely, leaving only ruins where stories might have been told? Imagine standing at the edge of a quiet sea, waves lapping gently at the shore. Once, across this water, barges carried invasion. Once, bombers roared overhead, their engines like drums of fate. Now the sea is calm, the horizon pale, the air filled only with the cries of gulls. History, in truth, did not follow the path we have traced, but the shadows of what might have been linger still, like ghosts in the tide, like whispers in the wind. For alternate history is not only a game of speculation, but a mirror, reflecting what was possible, what was avoided, what was chosen. To imagine Germany's triumph is to measure more deeply the cost of its failure. To imagine the atom over Berlin is to weigh more carefully the choices made over Hiroshima. To imagine children inheriting silence is to ask how we, too, will pass our own memories to those who follow. The spiral returns us to the opening shore, but the horizon has widened. The question is no longer only, what if Hitler had won? But what if humanity had lost itself in the process? What if power became so great that meaning could no longer endure? And conversely, what if, even in the darkest of timelines, humanity's stubborn spark in a whispered song, in a child's drawing, in a hidden poem proved stronger than any empire or weapon? We do not know. We cannot know. The past is fixed, but the imagination is infinite. Perhaps that is why these questions matter, not to find answers, but to remind us of fragility, of resilience, of the countless paths that history might have taken. The world we inhabit is one among many, a single branch on a tree whose roots are possibility, whose leaves are memory. To explore its branches is to understand more deeply the one we call our own. And so we leave this alternate world behind, its beaches littered with barges, its deserts filled with tanks, its skies torn by fire, its cities haunted by silence. We step back into our own, grateful yet uneasy, aware that history is not inevitable, that choices matter, that futures are fragile. The sea remains calm, the gulls still cry, but if we listen closely, we can hear the faint echo of questions that will never fade. What paths remain ahead? What stories will our children inherit? And when the tide of history turns again, will we remember the shadows of what might have been?